presenter up will be Roger Erickson. He is the warning coordination meteorologist at the Weather Forecasting Office for the National Weather Service in Lake Charles. I know he doesn't need any introduction to most of us, but Roger, if I missed anything, please introduce yourself, and we look forward to your presentation on this year's hurricane season.
Okay, thank you. And just to let everyone know, I'm not on the Zoom call. They don't allow us in the National Weather Service to use Zoom, so Carmen is going to be doing my slideshow for me, and hopefully you guys will be able to see it, and I'll be talking about what you're seeing up on the screen there. So our opening slide here is kind of looking back at last season with the rainfall that we had with Hurricane Barry, which occurred in July, and then later in the season with Tropical Storm Imelda. And, very different scenarios of both these things. Barry, we were expecting a big rain event close to the coast. We were advertising down near the Morgan City area upwards of 20, 30 inches of rain, and they got less than 5 or 6 inches. And we ended up getting a lot of rain up north of Lake Charles and Beauregard Parish, over in Allen Parish, Evangeline. We had the maximum rain total north of my house here, 23.5 inches of rain near Ragley, which happened well after the storm was inland. There was a outer rain band that was rotating around the low when it was up near Arkansas. The graphic on the right was Imelda. Imelda formed very rapidly. There was nothing out there, and then the next thing you knew, the National Hurricane Center put out a report for the storm right off the coast of a little bit south of Galveston, and unfortunately, Imelda was a slow mover, and slow-moving storms are the kiss of death when it comes to rainfall. And so Imelda, unfortunately, put down a lot of rain, over 40 inches in that yellow spot you can see there, and a good chunk of Jefferson County. One of the fortunate things that we have in Jefferson County is we've got the drainage district that has a multitude of rain gauges over there. So we seem to peg these huge rain numbers over there all the time. And so the reading for this one was 44.29 near Finette. Slide number 2 is talking about the 4 hazards of every tropical system out there: storm surge, rain, winds, and tornadoes. And every storm is different. Some of them have a higher hazard of the surge versus the rain versus the winds or tornadoes. So slide number 3, we're going to start with storm surge. And this is just a graphic that shows Hurricane Rita back in 2005 making landfall just over the state line in Louisiana near Johnson Bayou. And in general, the highest storm surge occurs on the right side of the storm motion due to the onshore winds. I drew this black arrow on the graphic here. In Louisiana, the winds are blowing from the south to the north, so we had onshore flow. In Texas, the winds are blowing from the north to the south, so we had offshore flow. And so that was the good news, if there wasn't any good news out of the Rita scenario, was that we didn't have the big storm surge in the southeast Texas because of that. Slide number 4 is the same graphic, but we're talking about where that highest storm surge is found, and it's typically near the eye wall. There's an eye in the center of these hurricanes, and so the eye wall can be 5 miles wide, it can be 50 miles wide. In the case of Rita, it was 50 miles wide, so the highest storm surge is typically in that eye wall on the right side of storm motion. The next series of slides is the worst case scenario for Category 1 through Category 5 for Southeast Texas. And so these graphics show how deep the water is above ground level across the area. And you'll notice that these numbers are going to jump on us really fast here. So Category 1 is, our best case scenario, I guess you could say, of the worst case scenarios, where water basically backs up all the local waterways. So water backing up the Sabine River, backing up Cow Bayou, backing up Hillebrand Bayou, the Neches River. So those are the spots that typically would see flooding from the storm surge in a Category 1 scenario, besides, of course, people down there at Sabine Pass. The next slide, 6, is Category 2, and suddenly the numbers just jump like that. And the reason the numbers jump is just because of the topography here in Southeast Texas, where it's relatively flat. So once we get the water to a certain depth, it's going to spread across a much larger area of an extent. So a Category 2 scenario, which is what we had during 2008 with Hurricane Ike, you can see sections of 73 are going to be underwater. There's potential that it could get to portions of Interstate 10 between Winnie and Beaumont, and over in Orange County, large sections of Orange County are underwater in this scenario. The next slide, 7, is Category 3. and very large areas of the population of Southeast Texas are impacted. I might also add there's a hatched area over the Port Arthur area. That's the levee system that they have in the Port Arthur region. We don't have a graphic here that shows, where would that levee system be compromised with the water coming over the top of it, because there's no one-stop answer for that. This is the kind of stuff that real time during an event we'll be monitoring the water levels, talking with the local officials there to see how the levee system is holding up. So more than likely, we know that at a Category 2 scenario, it could start overtopping the levee. Back in 2008 with Ike, the water was crashing over the top of the levee in downtown Port Arthur from the wave action. So we know Category 2 is really kind of borderline probably for scenarios of Port Arthur being inundated. So when you think of all the industries in Southeast Texas, they're all very vulnerable from this. We're probably a Category 2 and stronger. The slide number 8 is the Category 4 scenario, and slide 9 is the Category 5 scenario. And just huge numbers of waters. The red outline on here is water that's over 9 feet above ground level. So, if we ever had a Category 4 or a Category 5 hurricane, it would be, years, if not decades of recovering from an event that catastrophic here. And it's not just Southeast Texas, it extends over towards the Houston-Galveston area with their industries areas as well. There's these certain sections of the coastal populations of Texas that are more vulnerable from the storm surge, and unfortunately, Southeast Texas is one of them. So slide 10 is the rainfall graphic. The slower the storm is moving, the higher the rainfall. And so it has nothing to do with the speed of the storm. If it's a Category 5, Category 1 tropical storm, all it has to do with is how fast that storm is physically moving across the area. If it's a slow mover, if it's spinning around in circles and sitting over Houston for 2 days, I can guarantee you we're going to be getting a bunch of rain somewhere in our area of Southeast Texas. Slide 11 is the damaging wind scenario. Typically, the strongest winds are on the eye wall on the right side of the storm motion. Slide number 12, I should say, kind of depicts it for us here with the point A and point B. This is like the Hurricane Rita scenario. So imagine that the storm is moving inland at 20 miles an hour, and the speed of the storm is at 100 miles an hour. So the actual winds at point B on the right side, it's 100 plus 20, so it's 120 miles an hour in the eye wall on the right side. Whereas in the eye wall on the west side, point A, it's 100 miles an hour minus 20, so it's 80 miles an hour. So there is a significant difference in the wind speed from the left side versus the right side for these storms making landfall. Really, the bottom line with all these things is that you guys need to be rooting for storms to be hitting Louisiana as opposed to Texas for better conditions for you guys. Slide number 13 talks about the tornadoes. In the eye wall of Hurricane Rita, like this graphic in 2005, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of small vortices, tornado-like things that hit all across Southeast Texas and Southwest Louisiana. The other area of note is that sometimes these outer rain bands, hundreds of miles away, can also be prolific tornado producers. In fact, during 2005 with Hurricane Rita, the state of Mississippi had the most tornadoes on record the day of landfall here in Louisiana. Even though Rita was going into Texas during the day on Saturday the 24th, Mississippi was getting raked by, I want to say, 60 or 80 tornadoes that day. So, for us in Southeast Texas, we could have a storm done by Freeport and an outer rain band being up in our region, and we could be having 10, 20, 30 tornadoes associated with it. Okay, the next series of slides, starting with slide 14, is some information on the National Weather Service Wireless Emergency Alerts, WEA. The wireless emergency alerts are the things that pop up on your smartphones anytime we issue a tornado warning, a flash flood warning, hurricane warnings. Your phone will start beeping at you, and a little short text message pops up. So like this example here, the hurricane warning would look like this on your phone. It would say, NWS, hurricane warning this area, check media and local authorities. Well, the products that you're seeing on your phones are going to be extended in terms of the number of characters. So it's going up to a 360 character starting this fall. So you can see the paragraph below here is a little bit more information about the hurricane warning. It's in effect for the area for dangerous and damaging winds. This warning is issued up to 36 hours before hazardous conditions begin. urgently complete efforts to protect life and property, have food, water, cash, fuel, and medication for 3+ days, follow instructions from local officials. So we've got more information that we're going to be pushing out on these wireless emergency alerts that you get in your phone. So slide 15 is the one for the extreme wind warning. Not everyone's aware of the fact that in the event that we have a Category 3 or stronger hurricane making landfall somewhere in the U.S., we will issue this extreme wind warning for the eye wall. So back in 2005 with Rita, we did issue this extreme wind from parts of Southeast Texas and Southwest Louisiana, because we want people that are stuck in the eye wall specifically to be taking extra precautions, almost treating it like a tornado warning and staying inside of it there. Slide 16 is the tornado warning. You can see the short version at in the first text there and the longer one below that. A lot of people on slide 17 don't realize that the National Weather Service actually has a system for tornadoes. We have a tornado warning, and then we have a tornado emergency. And we upgrade emergency when we have a confirmed tornado going to a city. So if we see something heading towards Beaumont, or whatever the area that we're talking about over there, if we see it going into a city, then we're going to be upgrading the tornado warning to a tornado emergency to get people to take action from a situation. Slide 18 is the flash flood warning with the change in the text. And then slide 19 is similar to the tornado warning and tornado emergency. We do the same thing for the flash flood warning and flash flood emergency. So last year during Imelda, we actually had to issue the flash flood emergency for that section of Jefferson County with the I-10 that was going underwater, all the traffic that got trapped on the interstate. We issued a flash flood emergency for that scenario to let people know that this is a very serious situation. Large areas are going to be, people are going to be trapped where they're located. So that's kind of the two-tiered system for the tornado warnings, as well as a two-tiered system for the flash flood warnings. Slide 20 is storm surge warnings. So not only do we issue a hurricane warning, the hurricane warning is really a wind warning. The storm surge warning is specifically for the water coming in out of the Gulf of Mexico. So it's not a rainfall or a flash flood warning, it's a storm surge warning. And so this is a specific product that we issue for communities that we think are going to get impacted by water from the storm surge that's going to be 3 feet deep above ground level or higher. Slide 21 shows how far inland do we issue the storm surge watches and warnings. And you can see specifically in this area of Southeast Texas, as well as Louisiana, it goes north of Interstate 10. This goes to the fact that what the bathymetry looks like here in our region. We're just so flat that the storm surge can go quite a bit inland. Slide 22 is a new graphic that the Hurricane Center started last year experimentally. They're going to be doing it again this year and future seasons, for just doing a quick depiction of what kind of water levels are we expecting along the immediate coast. This is the example from last year during the hurricane season, and they'll be doing something similar if we ever have an event in our local area. So it's not going to be giving you a specific number for Beaumont or for Orange, but it will show you the numbers for along the immediate coast. The next graphic, slide 23, is the time of arrival graphics for the tropical storm force winds. And there's two different versions. The one on the left is called the earliest reasonable arrival time, and the one on the right is the most likely arrival time. And so this is last year in October. You can see the timing of these winds coming potentially into Southeast Texas. The graphic on the left, the closest line to us is Saturday at 8 p.m. The graphic on the right, the closest line is Sunday at 8 a.m. So the most likely arrival time is, when you for sure want to be done with whatever you got to do. If you got to be out on the road, you want it to be done before the arrival of these tropical storm force winds. The earliest reasonable graphic on the left is more for planning purposes for people that need additional time to get out of the area. So that's typically your people with special needs and whatnot that they need extra time to get out of the area. Slide 24 is some of the text of our products. When we issue the local tropical storm watch warning information for our area, the thing's a mile long. And there's a specific section for the wind, for the storm surge, for the rainfall, and for the tornadoes. So this is an example of the wind section of what it might look like. And it'll give you the specifics of what kind of wind speeds to expect in your area, the timing of it, and whatnot. And then below it, it's got these 3 bullet points: plan, prepare, and act. So there are specific call to actions that we have now across the National Weather Service. So whether you're in Florida on vacation or whether you're here at home and we're issuing these things, it's going to be the similar looking product from the National Weather Service. Slide 25 is our tropical web page. If you go well, you can see the address on here, and I might add, I believe they'll be emailing you the slides after our meeting today, so you can look at these places and bookmark them. But this is an example from a couple of years ago with Hurricane Harvey. There's 7 different tabs across the tropical web page. The Tropical Weather Outlook, which comes out at 7 and 3 a.m. and p.m. If there's an active storm, like this graphic here, it'll show you where the storm's located. The threats and impact section is a graphic zoomed in on our area, talking about what's the threat from the wind, the surge, the rain, and the tornadoes. Local products is the text products coming out of this office. And then satellite, radar, and social media are 3 bullet points that are always current. So it's always the most recent satellite picture, the most recent radar picture, and our most recent social media posts, whether it's Facebook or Twitter. What Hurricane Center will be doing is adding a 60-hour forecast point. This is an example from Hurricane Sandy back in 2012. The reason that a 60-hour forecast point is important is because for storms that are recurving, so they're not going in a straight line, but they're forecasted to curve, that 60-hour point will let people know if they're in a vulnerable area or not.
Different stages of training during June, but there won't be any completing training by the end of June. Okay. All good.
All right, someone's line got unmuted there, just to let you know. Slide 27 is our multi-day flash flood risk graphic. This was during Barry last year, outlining the big graphic goes over the next 3 days, and the smaller graphic shows you what day of the week we're expecting the heaviest rains and the flash flood potential across the area. And slide 28 shows what the different colors mean. So from the marginal risk, means isolated, flash floods possible, all the way up to the purplish, pinkish color for widespread flash flooding expected. Slide 29 is some of the verification statistics out of the Hurricane Center. You can see dating back to 1990, improvements in the track forecast. The red line is the 1-day forecast error. The green line is 2 days. Yellow is 3 days. Brown is 4 days, and blue is 5 days. So you can see gradual improvements every year. There are individual years that may not be as good as others. In fact, last year, 2019, if you look at the green and the red lines at the bottom there, we actually did worse forecasting for 24 and 48 hours in advance of where the storm will be located. So the Hurricane Center got worse at that perspective. The next slide, 30, is breaking it down by how strong the system is. For a tropical storm, less than 50 knots, that's the green that you see on here. So you can see, in general, the green is the worst of our job forecasting. A weak system is much more difficult to forecast where it's going to be located than a very strong storm. So the red line, red boxes on here is for the category 3 or stronger hurricanes. You can see that we do a much better job at forecasting where the major hurricanes are going to be located versus the weaker ones. Slide 31 is the air trends, and you can see that no significant improvement from one year to the next. We're literally not much different now than where we were in 1990. So that's incredible to think that in our 30 years worth here, we have not really shown significant improvements in terms of our 1-day, 2-day forecast of the wind speeds. Unfortunately, this is a reoccurring problem that we have in the National Weather Service, and it's one of the reasons why I always tell people to plan one category stronger than what we're talking about. So if we have 2 weeks ago there with that tropical storm, I always tell people we'll plan for a category 1, because the reality is we may miss it and it may be stronger than what we're advertising. Slide 32 shows the climatology of where hurricanes typically develop by month to month. So you can see June storms typically are in the Gulf of Mexico. So that's not good. And of course, we've already kind of verified that this month here. July, things shift between the Gulf and the East Coast. And then you can see August and September where things start developing further and further out in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, I will say the October graphic, which is kind of interesting, you notice that you don't see as much activity on the Texas side of the Gulf of Mexico. October, typically, it's more of the eastern sections of the Gulf of Mexico. It's not as often that we get activity in the western Gulf in the month of October. In fact, I always tell people that the most common time to see tropical activity in southeast Texas is typically the first 6 weeks of school. So middle of August to the end of September is typically when it's the busiest time of the season for us. And the last graphic there, the November, the bottom right, you can see that November typically it's a Caribbean scenario that can go across the Caribbean, but not necessarily across the United States. The next slide is a list of all the names for the season. We've already used up Artha and Bertha before the start of hurricane season, and we got Cristobal out of the way as well, right in the very first week of the hurricane season. So that's what we got coming up for this season here. The next slide, 34, is a satellite view last year of multiple storms going on at the same time, which is not unusual. It seems like every year around Labor Day, we got multiple storms going on, some of them in the Gulf, some of them in the Atlantic. We actually tracked probably 100 tropical waves moving across the Atlantic Ocean. And out of those 100 waves, maybe 10% become a tropical storm. And out of those 10 tropical storms, about half of them become a hurricane. Slide 35 shows the forecast that the NOAA people put out earlier this last month in May, where they're forecasting 13 to 19 storms. And out of those 13 to 19 storms, about half of them become a hurricane. Now those hurricanes, about half of them become a Category 3 or stronger. Slide 36 kind of goes into why we forecast more active seasons. And we're looking at water temperature anomalies across the globe, but specifically I got a red oval drawn on the near the equator in the Pacific Ocean. And so the yellow and oranges are temperatures above normal, and the blues are temperatures below normal. And so you can see back on January 1st, there's a little bit of a mix, some above, some below normal. We were a near normal temperature-wise across the tropical Atlantic, tropical Pacific in January. The graphic on the right was June 16th, and you can see a lot more blues are coming in, and there's less oranges. So we're still in the neutral state, but we're trending towards a La Nina. When you see all blue in that area, that's La Nina. When it's all yellow, orange, and whatnot, that's a El Nino. So we're transitioning from a neutral state to possibly a La Nina state, and well, that's the question mark that we'll be watching. The next slide, 37. I did a study a few years ago of how many systems we see in the Gulf of Mexico. So this isn't Texas, this is the entire Gulf. So all the way on the left side of the graphic here, we average 4.6 tropical storms in the Gulf of Mexico every year. And out of those 4.6 tropical storms, about 2 of them become a hurricane. Now those 2 hurricanes, about 1 becomes a major hurricane, Category 3 or stronger. So where are we this year? It's that yellow oval I drew on here, this year's pattern, the neutral state, where we average 4.8 storms, 1.5 hurricanes, 0.7 major hurricanes. But like I said, we may be transitioning from a neutral to La Nina, which is the next bars over to the right, the Hurricane Harvey scenario. That was a neutral to La Nina season. And you see the tropical storms jumps up to 5.7. The hurricanes jump up to 2.7, and the major hurricanes jumps up to 1.4. So this is a thing that we're going to be tracking very closely this summer, because if we do transition to a full-blown La Nina in July or August, well, then there's a good chance we're going to have a much more active season, specifically in the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, the next few slides are just some preparedness slides that the National Hurricane Center puts out. The slide 38 was put out the first day of the Hurricane Awareness Week earlier in May. Slide 39, determining your risk, knowing what your risk is from the storm surge, inland flooding, tornadoes, and winds. Slide 40, developing your hurricane evacuation plan, knowing where you're going to go, what you're going to do for your pets, plan your routes out. Slide 41, assembling your disaster supply kit, food and water, medicine's a big one, batteries for your radio and everything, gas for the vehicles, and cash on hand. 42, get your insurance checkup, see what kind of insurance you got for your location. If you got flood insurance, I know in Texas it takes 30 days. You can't do it when you see, oh shoot, there's a storm in the Gulf, let me go get flood insurance, or let me go get wind insurance. You got to do this 30 days before the named storm is in the Gulf of Mexico. So be aware of that. Really, now's the time to be getting that kind of insurance coverage for your location. Slide 43, strengthen your home. You know, what can you do to your house to retrofit it to make it safer, whether it's covering windows, trimming trees, securing outdoor items, and whatnot. Slide 44, being aware of some of your neighbors that may not have things that you can do yourself, especially the elderly people in your community, about making sure that they've got a way to help a lot of elderly people did not like to evacuate, and they won't evacuate, and it may be hard to convince them. But if you got elderly neighbors that don't have any family members nearby, I always tell people to see if they'd be willing to go with you to some location. Slide 45, complete a written plan. And that's the end of my slideshow. 46 and 47 is just the final slides on there. So that's it for me here at the National Weather Service. Does anyone have any questions for me?
All right, everybody, if you have a question for Roger, please just unmute yourself and ask away. If it gets too busy, we'll take turns, but please don't be shy. Well, I'll start us off, Roger. The wireless emergency alerts, are they geo-referenced kind of, or are they in those little blocked areas that you showed the map that are kind of close and then a little bit more inland?
The wireless emergency alerts, the way it works, it's done through your cell phone providers. So nothing to do with the National Air Service. The cell phone providers know where all their cell towers are located. So let's just say you got a cell tower in Winnie. Well, they're going to have anyone that can reach that cell tower in Winnie, they're going to have the Chambers County warnings going onto your phone, as well as the Jefferson County warnings on your phone. Versus maybe in Port Arthur, you may actually be getting the Jefferson County warnings as well as Orange County warnings, because you're right on the line between two locations. And actually, same thing for Beaumont. So many of the cities, in Jefferson County are on the county lines, it seems like. So you're probably going to be getting duplicates. You're going to be getting additional warnings for not just your county, but the neighboring county as well.
So those warnings are based on where your phone is at the time. So just because I have a 409 phone number, so if I'm off in Oklahoma or something, I'm not going to get that warning unless I'm physically in that area. Is that how you understand it?
Right. So yeah, if you're on vacation in Oklahoma, if they're having a tornado warning up there, then you're going to get that tornado warning for your location up there. And so that's one of the benefits of it, because people on vacation driving around the country or whatever else, and they don't even know what county they're even in. So this wireless alert system allows people to just not have to do their thinking on that part. It will just alert you that you're near a storm.
All right, that's great. Good info. Anybody else got a question for Roger? All right, everybody. Well, Roger, sounds like you did a great job. There's no questions. Everybody got all the answers in your presentation. Great job. We appreciate you coming here. You're welcome to stay on and listen or ask questions along with anybody else. But I understand if you got other stuff to do as well. We very much appreciate you giving us this year's hurricane brief. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Next up, thanks, Roger. Next up, we will have Carmen Apple, who's the district coordinator for TDEM, the Texas Division of Emergency Management, and she is based here in Beaumont, and she is going to give a COVID-19 pandemic hurricane response and recovery challenges. So, Carmen, if you're ready, we are ready to receive your great information.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I think I've transitioned over to my slides, so hopefully you're seeing those. This is going to be just a really short presentation because most of the COVID planning...
Carmen, I think we're still seeing the Roger's slides unless my screen's locked up.
Okay.
Might need to share a different window.
Yeah, just let me stop sharing and then ease out of his and reshare. One moment, please.
Sure, thank you. And as a reminder for everybody, I put a note out on the little chat thing, but if you have a question for the presenter, you can either type your question in there or just type in a note there that you have a question, and we'll pick you up at the end of their presentation. There we go. Now we can see you.
All right, good. So everybody should be seeing the title slide here. Again, my name is Carmen Apple. I'm the district coordinator with the Texas Division of Emergency Management. What I will share with you today is some of the challenges that we at the state will be facing in terms of supporting your local jurisdictions and their support of you during a hurricane response and recovery this season in the COVID environment. I'm not going to go into a lot of in-depth local planning because we do have Tim with the City of Beaumont, Robert with Jefferson County, and Louis with the City of Port Arthur that focus and are the local representatives. So they're going to be talking a little bit more about their local planning and some challenges that they are facing. But I will discuss with you some of the overall challenges that we at the state are seeing in terms of how we're going to support and maybe things that may be changing this year in how we support our local jurisdictions. So first of all, for those of you that are not familiar, the Texas Division of Emergency Management is its own state agency. Prior to September of 2019, we were a division within the Department of Public Safety. September of 2019, under the 86th legislative session, we were created as our standalone state agency, and we are currently umbrellaed under the Texas A&M University system. We are tasked by the legislature and the governor for all phases of emergency management in the state of Texas. And most importantly, we are merely a support mechanism for local jurisdictions in their emergency management programs and plans across the state. So I say that to emphasize that we at the state will not come in and tell local jurisdictions how to operate. We will merely come in to support their operations with resources that they may not have at the time. So first of all, if a storm threatens our area, naturally the local jurisdictions will be contemplating whether or not to evacuate. Evacuation authorities lay with the local government officials, and that is under Texas Government Code Chapter 418. That is the emergency management statute for the state of Texas, and it says that the local mayors and the local county judge will be the ones to declare evacuations. They can declare evacuations for all of the area within their jurisdiction or some of the area within their jurisdiction. Fortunately, at this area in Texas, we have a very good collaboration and cooperation with our local elected officials when it comes to hurricane planning. They meet quite frequently during the threat of a tropical storm to our area, and they work to make sure that they are all on the same page. Tim, Louis, or Robert can speak more about that, but I will say that it's really unprecedented in the state of Texas to have the type of collaboration and cooperation that we do here in our area when it comes to planning for tropical storms. With that being said, under Government Code 418, when it pertains to evacuations, the county judge has the final say. So if there's a discrepancy between a mayor and the county judge as to whether or not there should be an evacuation called, the law states that the county judge's decision is the final decision for evacuations. The governor will not come in and order an evacuation. That authority clearly lies with the local officials under Government Code 418. Where the state comes in is once the local officials have decided to either partially evacuate or evacuate fully, then the Department of Public Safety will implement its state traffic management plan. So what does that mean for you and your workers and things that need to happen during this planning phase? You'll see the evacuation map that currently is on the Texas Department of Transportation website. This shows the state management traffic plan for the flow of traffic during an evacuation. Once an evacuation is called and the Department of Public Safety implements the state traffic management plan, then you will see troopers out there that will direct traffic northward. So traffic for our area will go for 96, 69, Highway 87. You'll see all of those areas highlighted. The areas that are blue with the outlying orange around them, those include potential evacuate lanes. Those are the lanes where you've seen on the shoulders that they have the hurricane symbol that could be opened up to allow an additional lane for evacuation traffic. This means that you will be restricted on where you go and whether or not you can get off and go to different directions. Our recommendation is if you have family members that need to get out, if the local jurisdictions call for a voluntary evacuation or make a recommendation for voluntary evacuation, have the workers or family members that can leave at that time do so that they can move about freely in the state and go where they need to go without being redirected to one of the evacuation lanes. Once those lanes are established, again, troopers will be out there and they will be directing traffic to the north. One thing I want to mention about our traffic management plan is at the very bottom of the graphic, you will see the legend, and on the legend, it mentions potential contraflow routes. For our area, the DPS captain of the Highway Patrol has made it very clear that contraflow would be one of the last traffic management options that is implemented. And that will be done if we pretty much have a parking lot out there and tropical storm force winds are hitting. Contraflow operations are very labor intensive. There is a lot of hazard associated with contraflow routes, but we do have one planned. It will be a last ditch effort to get people off the freeway. So just be aware of that as we move forward. One thing that I want to bring up that COVID has challenged us is in the sheltering portion of hurricane planning. So due to COVID, many sheltering jurisdictions may choose what we call non-congregate sheltering, and they will utilize hotels or motels. So what that means is when we evacuate our populace, and our populace goes to a sheltering jurisdiction, like Walker County or the Dallas-Fort Worth area, because of COVID, we cannot have large numbers of people in a shelter wide open like we have in the past. So an option that is being looked at is what's called non-congregate sheltering, where those individuals that need shelter will be provided a room of their own. So sheltering jurisdictions, as well as the American Red Cross, are looking at hotels and motels for potential non-congregate sheltering. What does that mean for you and your family? Could mean that there's no hotels or motels available if you decide to evacuate. So our recommendation would be is you do not have a place to go. If your family does not have a place to go, if you are considering leaving and trying to get a hotel or motel, make that plan way in advance, because if this is an option that the local jurisdictions and the American Red Cross choose to utilize, you may not have a hotel or motel that is available for you or your family to shelter at until you can get back in town. So COVID-19 has really challenged us in terms of how we are going to take care of people that evacuate that don't have a place to go. We can no longer put them in the large shelters like the Kay Bailey Hutchinson shelter up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We have to figure out how far apart they need to be. What other options do we have for non-congregate sheltering? So that really minimizes the number of people that we may be able to shelter, and it also minimizes the number of facilities that we could utilize for non-congregate sheltering. So make that plan early and realize that hotels and motels may not be readily available. We know in the past they've been difficult to get just because of the number of people that were evacuating and taking up hotels and motels. Now we're looking at additional difficulties because those jurisdictions and our American Red Cross that do our sheltering may be looking at those hotels to shelter people in. So that could be very problematic for you if you're looking at evacuating and going to a hotel or a motel. Re-entry, when you come back in for you and your workers, that is a plan that recognizes the local emergency management director's decisions regarding how they want to implement that. So what that means is the local jurisdictions must assess their damage, they must assess their critical infrastructure, and they must assess how they can support re-entry prior to letting people come back. They will determine when that happens and how that happens. We at the state will support their plan. So if they determine that they cannot immediately take individuals back within the first 24, 48, 72 hours, we at the state will be working to support to make sure that their evacuees are taken care of at the sheltering jurisdictions, and we will work to support what they need to try and quickly bring up the infrastructure that they need to support re-entry. But that is all managed and handled by the local jurisdictions. If we are asked, we could assist with perimeter control around the area. However, as we've seen in the past, there is a lot of back roads and a lot of ways to get into an area that may be shut down. So while we can assist with that, it does not absolutely lock down the disaster area. But again, that is by law. That's Texas Government Code 418. The state does not do re-entry. We are working to assist with credentialing across the state so that if first responders need to come in, we know that they are properly credentialed. We know who they are. We know that they are here to support the local jurisdictions, but it is the locals who determine who comes in, when they come in, and how they come in post-storm. I want to talk a little bit about how COVID has really impacted our federal and state resources that could be coming in to support the local jurisdictions. First of all, obviously, COVID being a pandemic has tied up a lot of medical resources. Typically, when we see a tropical storm that makes landfall, it might impact our hospitals. It might impact our medical abilities to help with people that are injured, to help with the day-to-day medical emergencies that happen, even with those people who did not evacuate. So because COVID has really stressed our medical capability, those resources may be extremely limited and scarce when it comes to deploying down here for a hurricane or tropical storm response. Those medical personnel will probably not be able to be deployed from their operations in their hometowns directed to COVID to responding down here for our operations during a hurricane. So we may have some severely limited medical resources. We also have to think about that in the COVID environment in terms of individuals in our area that may now become exposed or may now exhibit COVID symptoms during a hurricane response. Those emergency rooms, those hospitals may not be able to accept them. So we have to make a plan to divert them to other hospitals or medical facilities outside of this impacted area. And that could be challenging as well, as we are seeing an increase in some of the COVID cases and an increase in some of the hospitalizations. So medical resources are extremely scarce right now. And what that's going to look like when a tropical storm hits our area is not going to be what it looked like in the past when we've had a lot of medical resources that come in to help us. Likewise, law enforcement has gotten very scarce lately because of protests, demonstrations, and the civil unrest that is occurring throughout the state as well as throughout the nation. Our law enforcement officers are tasked in their home areas, and the state troopers are tasked with supporting those local jurisdictions with the demonstrations and the protests that they are currently seeing. So in order to secure an area after the storm has made landfall, we may need to rely on resources other than law enforcement, because those law enforcement resources may not be as plentiful as they were in the past. In the past, we've had numbers from 150 up to 500 state troopers that have been deployed down here for Ike and Rita and Harvey, some of the larger storms. That's probably not going to be a possibility if we get a storm this season, simply because we currently have thousands of troopers that are deployed to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, the Houston area, the San Antonio area, the Austin area, because of the civil unrest that they are seeing there, and the need for them to assist those local law enforcement agencies and protect the buildings and things that are being attacked in those areas. Our National Guard and Texas Military Department, currently we do have some assets and resources in those areas that we can deploy, but those are simply for logistical support right now. Medical resources within the National Guard and Texas Military Department are currently being utilized in our COVID pandemic response. Those are some of the mobile testing teams that you are seeing throughout our area and throughout the state that are helping. They're also being utilized in food bank distribution for people who are impacted by economic loss and need assistance with food. So our National Guard and Texas Military Department are currently being utilized not only medically, but also logistically. However, we still do have some support that we could use from them when it comes to logistical support. We have to make sure that we state that the National Guard and Texas Military Department are not used for law enforcement purposes. We don't arm them to come in to patrol with police officers. They are not law enforcement, and they will not do law enforcement duties. They can assist with perimeter control. They can assist with logistical support in moving resources around. They can assist in the distribution of commodities should we need that, but medical resources within them are very limited, and they are not tasked with law enforcement duties. So some of those state resources and federal resources that we have typically used in the past for tropical storm and hurricane response are extremely limited now, because they're being utilized for not only COVID response, but for the civil unrest response as well. So that ends my slideshow right there. And again, I'm not going to delve too deeply into the local planning, because that's what we have Tim and Robert and Louis participating with, and they can answer more of the questions that you may have pertaining to what the local plan is. But if there's any questions regarding what the state plan is, I'll be more than happy to take those.
Carmen, this is John Durkee, and I want to pass this on for purposes of Louis. There's been the regular inquiry regarding Lumberton High School, and the suggestion I've got with respect to that between industry and the chiefs is take a look at whether or not it might be useful to have a small amount of COVID type stuff stocked up there, masks, gloves. Would that not possibly be something worth thinking about for this season?
Well, John, first of all, we have been in conversation with the representatives up in Lumberton and Hardin County. I've had a couple conversations with Aaron. I know Aaron's on the line, and I've also had a few conversations with the city of Lumberton as well. The shelter situation up there for industry, our industrial partners, and all our essential employees is still good to go. Nothing's really changed from the past. As far as PPE supplies, we're going to operate that just like we do a good old-fashioned Texas barbecue. Bring your own. We really don't have the capacity to stockpile anything. And at this point in the game, the availability of PPE is such that it behooves each employer to ensure that their employees are properly protected. The message has gone out to our partners that to try to keep their response folks that would be utilizing that facility down to a bare minimum, so we can maintain social distancing as much as possible. That's really the best answer I have for you.
That's a good answer, Louis. And what I can do is two things. If you want, I can tell the guys that's how it's going to work. They already know that. But the second thing I can do too is I bet I could get some contribution for everybody's benefit. We'll just see.
Okay, that sounds good, John. Thank you.
So, John, also just adding to what Louis has mentioned, PPE again is high demand right now. And we have a warehouse currently in San Antonio where we are receiving PPE and we are distributing it to those that need it. And it's not just the first responders typically that we're thinking of when we talk about the PPE. We are also getting requests from nursing homes, assisted living facilities, medical facilities, dental facilities, all of these type of facilities that cannot acquire PPE right now are looking to the state to support that. And we are currently supporting that in getting that distribution out to those that are requesting it. So we do strongly urge the local jurisdictions and the local industry to try and get PPE on their own, because if they're requesting it from the state, because of the large numbers of requests that we have for PPE, it could be some time before you get it. For example, when we first started the COVID response, we had over 10,000 requests for over 20 million pieces of PPE. So you can see it was a very large, daunting task that we had to help support, and we're still supporting it, particularly now as we're seeing large numbers of crowds with demonstrations and protests and the need for PPE to try and mitigate COVID during these types of rallies. So we strongly encourage the locals and industry to try and secure their own, because it could be a large delay in the state getting it to them.
Yeah, exactly, Carmen. And my guys have a lot of it. They're way down the road on that. So I'll just see if I can't have them cover the issue as opposed to any public sources, and just figure out a way to get it up to Lumberton if and when needed. Not too worried about it.
Okay, everyone, we are ahead of schedule, and I don't know if anybody else is feeling the same thing, but I think I'm going to add a quick break. We were going to do it after Carol O'Reilly's presentation, but I think we're going to take the break now, and that'll actually give us one extra break later on before we're all wrapped up for a couple hours. So we will take a break now. I have it as—
Hey, real quick.
Yes, ma'am.
Tim had a quick question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Tim.
It wasn't as much of a question as a follow-up to what Mayor Durkee said.
Hold on. He couldn't get it to unmute on his. Okay.
So one of the things I would caution everybody is we're not just looking at hurricanes. We're also looking at flooding. A couple weeks ago, we had some pretty extensive flooding, and we had a lot of rescues required and stuff like that. So, you know, during this time of COVID, we're just necessitated to be able to open even emergency shelters in a pandemic environment. So having that PPE and leveraging, being self-sufficient is just critical.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate that.
Tim, I've got a plant managers meeting coming up next Thursday. It's real easy for me to raise this issue and get some contingency going to cover that, because I know my guys have a lot of stuff.
All right, good note. Thanks, John. All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break, 5 minutes. Since it's an unplanned break, we'll squeeze it in. And I think even when we come back, we'll still be a little ahead of schedule. So everybody, please be back 9:55. So a 5-minute break. We'll be back on at 9:55. I recommend you just stay logged in. If you need to step away from your computer, that's no problem. And we'll see everybody in just a few minutes. Okay, everybody. I think we're back on the line, back on time, and still a little ahead of schedule. Up next will be Carol Riley. She is the Public Information Officer for the City of Beaumont. As she introduced herself earlier, been with the city, I think she said 28 years, and her and Tim joined at about the same time. So she is going to give us a presentation on public outreach. Carol, can you start us off there?
Okay, we had to turn some other computer volume down so there wouldn't be a lot of echo and feedback here. So as I said earlier, I am Officer Carol Riley. I work for the Beaumont Police Department. I've been with them for 28 years. Before that, I was with Orange County briefly. And before that, in Fort Riley, Kansas, I worked for Geary County Sheriff's Office. One of the primary things I do now as a public information officer, I was an officer, street officer, worked in all the different units for about 18 years. And when I transitioned into public information, one of the things I noticed, you run into so many emergencies, you don't have time to necessarily train, you're training on the go. And we're one of the few departments that have dedicated PIOs. Most agencies have officers that wear a lot of different hats. So, you know, coordinating and making sure we're all getting information out and getting training was one of the biggest issues that, you know, I noticed. And I remember Carmen and Crystal, as they were passing on info, you know, with technology, you're trying to stay caught up. We went from using primarily phones and faxing to media that you only had at 5 o'clock in the evening and maybe 6 and 10 to nonstop. It's everybody wants their information instantly. They don't care a lot of times whether or not it's factual. So fighting rumors are one of the biggest challenges we have. Another problem that I noticed through the years, through the different hurricanes and flooding and now with the COVID pandemic, was that there's so much information out there that as a PIO, and especially a PIO that hasn't had a chance to get any training, you have to have a place to where you can go and get to information quickly without spending what little bit of time you have for research scanning the web. So Beaumont being the one area that had dedicated PIOs, we usually are challenged with standing up a JIC, the Joint Information Center, and we kind of go through all the conference calls and share information. And as other people were retiring and it was limiting the amount of staff we had, it just kept getting overwhelming with all the Facebook and Twitter and, you know, different media sources. So I was looking at our southeasttexasinfo.org page and realizing, speaking with Clem, that no one was really, it wasn't getting the hits or getting the attention that it needed to get when we were putting information out. So speaking with Clem and with Shay here in our emergency management office, we discussed making Southeast Texas Info more of a one-stop shop where we would have links. We started it with Crime Stoppers, to where when you go on the Crime Stoppers webpage, you notice that you can see what the agencies that are involved, you can see their Facebook pages and some of their info. And so we wanted to broaden that and make it to where southeasttexasinfo.org had links to everything we needed during different types of situations that we may be encountering at the time. Are you guys able to see the crawler that's going across the screen, the web page? Is it up and the crawler working? There should be a crawler going across saying coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, be prepared but not panic. Hopefully you can see that. That's one of the neat things. Southeast Texas Info, it's basically owned by Sabine Neitsch's Chiefs. So Shay worked with the board and we were able to get authorizations to revamp the website. And I think we got authorization around the end of August, and Clem had some surgeries and we had one inject after another. So it took a little bit of time, and my goal was to have it up and running by hurricane season. We did that, but COVID hit, and my goal, I jumped it up to have it up and ready to assist with the COVID issues that we were facing. So the page that you're seeing right now, just so you know, you go to setinfo.org. A lot of people are putting the SETX. It's just common in this area. We're very thankful that Sabine Neitsch's Chiefs allowed us to do this, because this site, I've even had feedback from local media saying they use it because we do give them one location to see a lot of different information. And I'm going to walk you through it, because a lot of people would get confused and they'd see this page and they'd think that's all it was. Let's see. Let me see if I can get out of here. For some reason, my speaker. There we go. So what you do with this website is you would go down and click on whatever county, and you'll notice that there is Jefferson County, Orange County, Hardin County. And because of COVID, when we started working with Newton, Jasper, and different counties and areas that we're not usually linked up with, we added a neighboring jurisdiction link. So if you were to go to the website, if you wanted to find out information about what's going on in Jefferson County, you would click on Jefferson County, and then you have the options of government or emergency management, law enforcement, fire and rescue type entities, health. My stuff is blocking some of this, so I'll make sure. Health, medical, and EMS, educational facilities, industry, utilities, transportation, which has TxDOT and your ports in it, and then weather. So if I wanted to find out what's going on, let's say with Beaumont, what this did is this offered us to be able to click on, when we click on to the city of Beaumont, you're able to see their information, their website, you can see their Facebook, and you're able to see Twitter. Not everybody has all of these options for their media that they are able to put out, but we put as much as they do have on each page. So this just gives you an idea. You can roll through. You do not have to have Facebook or Twitter to be able to see this. So this helps with some of our population that are not tech savvy. They're not able to necessarily maneuver Twitter or Facebook or those different types of social media programs. So this gives you an opportunity, if you want to know what's going on Facebook with the city of Beaumont or what they're tweeting out, you can go to this website and find that. Let's say you live in Orange County and you want to find out what's going on maybe in Orange County, or, well, we're in Jefferson right now, but you'll also see we have emergency management, their websites, their social media information. We'll go back to Orange County. Let's say I wanted to know what's going on in Orange County, maybe their police department. You know, we're hearing all kinds of rumors about stuff going on in Orange County. Let's say I want to look and see if they've put some information out. I can click on that badge and I'll see what information they have going out. So it's pretty simple to use once you figure it out. In the beginning, a lot of people had to figure out where to click. The neighboring jurisdictions, we started working with Jasper County, Newton, and then I wanted to make sure we had surrounding locations. If you wanted to know, since a lot of us are so close to the border of Louisiana, we get a lot of calls and questions about, especially with COVID, when we were seeing that you weren't able to travel without quarantine. They wanted to see information. We have a lot of family and friends that live in these surrounding counties or areas, but you can click on and see information there, what's going on with the different government entities. We also, if you look in government and emergency management, we added, you'll see we have Port Arthur, we added Tatum, of course, is on here. So pretty much anything you want to find. I think it's really neat that you have that option right there. You don't have to scan the web or look through different Facebooks. You're able to just go to this website, and let's say you want to know what's going on with Hardin County with transportation, maybe. We do have links to Drive Texas, Port of Beaumont, and there's a lot of different entities that are used not just by one county, but several. And I was going to find one of those for you. You'll notice Hardin County has some of the same things that the other ones do. We added CDC on there, of course, because of COVID, and we can change those out. Normally during this time of year, the crawler would read hurricane related information, but we're waiting until our numbers go down a little more in this area, and then I'll change the crawler that's going across with more ready.gov information, things like that. But this helped as far as rumor control. We were able to pull someone in that, you know, may not be trained in public information, but it's easy for us to grab an able body to come in and scan this, look over it, and check it for inconsistencies with what's actually happening, rumor control, things like that. We do know that even though we may give interviews to the media or give them information, they have you could talk to them for 15 or 20 minutes and they do a quick sound bite that may have nothing to do with the message or the talking points that you're trying to get out. So with technology, we're able to do our own FaceTime lives, put our own information out. We use our press release pages a lot. Scanning through here, you could go to the city of Beaumont and you would be able to see, and of course I just kicked us out of it, sorry about that. You would be able to go in and see what press releases the different counties, city entities are putting out. And this has worked really well for us. Of course, being really short-handed, most of us were able to just go in and check that information and actually share it with the public and let them know if there's questions they have and they're not real tech savvy. This is a great tool you can use during hurricane season. If we were to have a major incident that was occurring in our area, we can push them to this and we can change out some of our messaging. And more important than anything is making sure that all of the organizations, entities, different law enforcement agencies, and government agencies are keeping their social media and their websites up to date. That was a lot of the issues we were seeing, is there were people that weren't even updating or doing anything with their social media sites or their websites. So as we were letting them know that we were putting them on this site, checking, getting their logos, we were letting them know, look, you probably need to update your information. We're seeing some of this hasn't been updated in 10, 20 years. So especially the websites. So that's primarily what, I've been using as a tool here and sharing with our local agencies. And it seems to help. We haven't had much pushback. Again, I'm very thankful that Sabine Natchez Chiefs allowed us to revamp and use this as a one-stop shop, kind of a hub of information. And again, it helps for those agencies and different entities that don't have dedicated PIOs. They're able to just push their message out on their own Facebooks and websites, things like that. So if anyone has any questions, that's all I basically have on that for now.
All right, Carol. Well, thank you very much for that great presentation. I hope it gives everybody a little insight and another resource to get a lot of great info. We really appreciate you sharing that with us. Are there any questions for Carol on the website or anything else related to public outreach or public affairs, public information? It's odd when you're online, you always have to wait for that extra delay to give somebody a minute to unmute and talk. So there's a lot of open space sometimes, or empty airspace, but that's okay.
No problem. But if you are on this call right now and you notice that we're missing something or we need to add something to it, you'll see in like our health area, we've added some of the places that are doing testing. They may not be on here on a regular basis, maybe like during hurricane season, but you'll notice we have like AFC and MedExpress because they were doing a lot of the major testing in our area. And, just we can tweak it to whatever is going on at the time.
Great. Thank you, Carol.
Steve,
Appreciate your time
Steve,
spending with us.
This
Go ahead, John.
Regional Planning Commission guys, Steve, et cetera, check and see if Stan's on that. That's
Good
a good
idea.
place to show Stan.
It's a lot of it is when you're sharing. I'll look again on it. We did have links to it, but that's another thing we do is we push registering for emergency notifications. I'll go through again. I'm trying to remember if we had just the Stan link or if it was on our, like we have emergency management pages. I know it's on Jefferson County's emergency management page, and I'll look again.
All right. Anything else for Carol? All right, Carol. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'm going to take a little bit of an information plug here. If you notice in the Zoom chat group that we have, we've got the ability to post files there. So if you would, as we go, and I know Carol, yours wasn't a presentation exactly, but if you have a presentation, I know Carmen just posted the hurricane preparedness, both the presentation that she gave and Roger Erickson's thing. So those are, if you're able to download them there, makes it real easy for everybody in the group to download and have good access to. You can forget about my little thing. I posted a document that said test. I just want to make sure it worked. so anyway, all right. So that's another great tool for us. Next, we are going to move on to system resiliency and emergency management. First up will be Tim Oknichek. He's the emergency management coordinator for the city of Beaumont. And Tim, as you come online, I'm going to take the host privilege and ask you just an open question that did you guys have some significant challenges trying to do EOC staffing with social distancing? Because most EOCs are very crammed, very packed, and only made for the number of people that are supposed to be in there and don't have a whole lot of extra space. So I'll kind of post that as an opening question as you get settled in here and are getting ready to go. Tim, are you there with us?
Yeah, you're here.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
While Carol's going to help me, I'm sort of technically challenged, but it's a Word document that's down there at the bottom. Okay, and I'm going to answer that question that wasn't on the posting comments that I have, and I appreciate that. But basically, what staffing of EOC is always difficult. I think every jurisdiction is going to be different in how they handle that. We're fortunate to have a nice facility, but regardless of what the facility is, social distancing, even without social distancing, any incident that takes this long, it's not like a couple days and you're out. It's been over 3 months that we've been activated, and there's other work that has to go on, and continuity of government, continuity of business is always a big issue. And so we've tried to work our systems and leverage the virtual networks, just because it's such an extended deal that a lot of people need to use their own offices and their own staffs to keep up. And so that's actually worked to our advantage because it's kept people spread out in multiple facilities through the city. We have our logistics section chief just happens to be currently the public works director. He was over information technologies and communications and 311, and now he's been given some other duties as well. So he's remained our logistics section chief. So he has instead of having the logistics section stood up in the EOC itself, it's a remote logistics section. And, fortunately our procedures already were in place for data sharing and so forth. And one of the things we'll discuss is Teams, Office 365 platform that is critical to communication. But I think some of the benefits of having a versatile EOC staff and communication system is the ability to handle such issues as this is a pandemic where we're having to social distance. So our public health, things in the past that public health has been involved in has usually been very short term as well. This one's not. And they have a significant amount of staff. Pretty much their whole department is engaged 7 days a week. And so that takes up their whole building. So, being connected virtually is important for conference calls and so forth. So, usually public health has a minimal footprint in the EOC. But, now, you couldn't fit everybody in the EOC that's working this instance. So does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Am I there? There we go. Sorry, my computer was clicking there for a minute. Yeah, absolutely did, Tim. I appreciate it.
And so, transitioning into the briefing, which I'll try to keep short. I know I don't have a lot of time, but the big thing is every after action that we have is always a communications issue. And so not just leveraging because of pandemic, but actually there's some benefits in some of the new systems that are out and things like that. I had the briefing somewhat similar to last year's, broken down into a private and public section. And I have not transitioned it to a PowerPoint. So if y'all can bear with us, I'll just use a Word document, which I actually already have provided. So if y'all need a copy of it, but it's comment points for discussion. And by all means, if you have a comment or want to jump in, if you interrupt me, then I will quit talking so you can jump in. But for the sake of this, hopefully it's a discussion and not just one way. But we have a collaborative system on 911. A lot of our programs, Carmen mentioned earlier, are regional in nature. That collaboration works in every aspect of government and the way we manage emergencies and even routine businesses. If you get the alerts from industry that come out and somebody's flaring or if there's an issue, whether it's TPC or whether it's a flooding scenario or whatever, we use a very collaborative nature, and that's the same in 911. I'm trying to remind myself where I was going from that issue. Oh, the transference. So the communication piece is that those calls are automated so that if one system's down, it can be transferred to another area, whether it's inside the jurisdiction or to a neighboring jurisdiction to help. We've had issues, TPC for instance, where when there's an overload in one area, the rollovers come to, in this case, us, and the city, our 911 center. We also have a call center set up in there. It's a hot site, so we have the capacity to stand up immediately with an additional staff to take call overloads, which helps us with the 311 piece, city information and 911. And it did in that case as well, because when the 911 calls started coming in, we were able to take a lot of the calls and process those. But that's managed by a regional 911 and is very collaborative. Satellite coverage, I don't know about y'all, but it used to be the thing, everybody had a handheld phone, and we've gotten away from them quite a bit. The coverage of the satellite systems in this area has been very problematic. If you have the big systems, they seem to work, but the handheld, like Global Star types, are, if there's a cloud in the sky, sometimes you can't get connectivity. it was very, problematic. Now, the big systems, you have the not just the cost of keeping them in up, but there's a lot of software updates, constant updates, which have been problematic. Where we've done a lot better is in cellular and radio. Cellular FirstNets come on with that, with AT&T getting that FirstNet contract. That's been beneficial because there's a lot more towers and the coverage is a little better. AT&T, I don't think, has had quite as good of a reputation in Southeast Texas as Verizon. And but in some parts of like East Texas, it's the reverse. So, one thing while we're talking communication is not just versatility, but redundancy, having being wholly reliant on one network or one platform, communication platform, is not really that advisable. What we've done is tried to split it so we have both major services. I mentioned AT&T and Verizon. I know there's a bunch of others, but those two provide, even though AT&T has FirstNet, Verizon has priority service that they provide. And offhand, I'm not sure how many other providers do, but Verizon's a big one. And because their coverage is so well in this area, that's important. And we'll talk about WPS and GETS in a moment. But, again, we have issues when it comes to coverage sometimes when there's a big event, or for instance, like if you go out by Ford Park when we have the fair or a major event, there's not a lot of towers out there. They sort of base the towers and the coverage based on traffic and how much bandwidth they need. And so what we traditionally do is either work with them to up the coverage during major events, or we bring in a communication on wheels, like a cell tower on wheels, and basically they up the coverage in that or both respects. And that helps. Even sometimes downtown, if there's a large event, you have to work with that. But, from the private side, text, it takes a lot less bandwidth. And if you're having trouble getting a phone service through, text is beneficial. When it comes to emergency alerts, Roger talked about I guess it was WEA, wireless emergency alerts. There's the iPause, which is basically it's been a little difficult to use for us, and Roger talked about one of the issues is that it's cell tower based, so it just broadcasts from anybody in that cell tower. So let's say I'm on a jurisdictional line or a county line, my messages may be pushed into other people's jurisdictions. It may not totally be appropriate to the whole population that receives the message. That's been an issue with both the state and federally to limit how many people have access to iPause, and the state, for a time, it was limited to just one per county. We've minimally used it because we have such a good working relationship with the National Weather Service. The regional offices can put out messages, and working with them, we can use the EAS, the Emergency Alert Service, which, could put a crawler across your TV or interrupt other communications. And then with the wireless emergency alerts, they have access. So we can, you know, if there's, say, some big plant emergency or some big emergency that we have, we can collaborate with our partners, such as the National Weather Service, to get those messages out through those networks as well, even if we don't have direct IPAWS access through our own emergency vendors, which we have been successful in making inroads in. Our current provider regionally is Blackboard, and I know a number of private organizations, I think, are using Blackboard or have also looked at that platform. But STAN, the Southeast Texas Alert Network, is managed through the Plant Managers Forum, and that's sort of a different vendor, but it's still in collaboration with the local emergency management offices within Jefferson, Hardin, and Orange counties, which are all using Blackboard, and that's a regional contract. And we'll talk about that a little more later. So if you can roll down, we'll move into several public items. I think my conversation's getting a little long-winded for the time that I had, so I'll go briefly into communication impacts. You know, a lot of people are moving to a voice over internet provider type phone systems. And so, you know, everything's computer based. So when you have issues such as cyber impacts or say hacking and things like that can be a problem with your phones too. Most of your, I guess all fax lines are analogs. So, you know, it's good to have some redundancy there. A lot of issues that we have when we're doing reverse 911 type calls is that if you have a big facility or a multi-line business, it's going to have one number that's recorded for 911. So we buy that 911 information quarterly, regionally. But again, you know, if you're in a big building, the chances are that there's only one 911 number. It's not one number. It's not like every phone you pick up goes directly to 911. So again, we're relying on that voluntary registration of cell phones, even for your employees or your business and or your industry or government. So it's important to make sure that not only are we reaching out to the public to voluntarily register their cell phones, that we're making sure that our call numbers are updated for our employees. IPAWS, you can see that. We talked about it briefly. GETS is the landline, the federal priority service that would allow you to use to preempt or to get priority on a landline. The wireless, the WPS is the wireless side. If you have a FirstNet cell phone, which is band 14 chip in it, that is automatically going to be WPS, but you know, got to make sure you're registered and so forth. So that's important, you know, especially for the critical people, whether you're industry or business, health, not just for the first responder departments. I'll skip over FirstNet since we've talked about it a little bit. WebEOC, mostly we're using that for resource requests from emergency management at the local level to the state level to Carmen specifically. And some of those things are routed all the way to the state operations center. Some of them are handled through the district that Carmen oversees. Moving down a little bit into the radio systems, we have been doing a major upgrade of our radio system. Again, a regional collaboration. It's been in progress for many years. I don't remember offhand, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's in the neighborhood of 20 years. But in the last 10 or 12, we've made some significant strides. We're leveraging almost every grant. Steve Kern at the Regional Planning Commission has been, you know, a real integral part of this process. We're nearing probably September. We're looking at switching over to full digital, hopefully. And this was with quite a bit of assistance, grant assistance, particularly from the Port grant. Captain Agreziak and in his prior life, and some other captains of the Port have been extremely important to pursuing this regional platform that's so important. It's one of the few things that's been resilient enough and robust enough to not give us problems, even with the variety of disasters that we've had. And so we've, knock on wood, that's important. We have some state, we have a regional interop, the word won't come to me, like a whole zone that's 12 different interop talk groups. And then there's VHF and UHF state talk groups that we monitor through our 911 centers, primary safety points, answering points, the PSAPs, which every agency, every government agency has one. And those are all available. The Port's on the regional radio system, and you know, our hope is that industry, even though sometimes they're going to a different system, will at least have one or two radios capable at their EOC of collaborating with the regional system. I'll just mention encryption real quickly. And that is, if you want some private conversations, it's expensive, $800–900 a radio, but it's a expensive option. You do have to have a digital channel, but by September, we'll all be on digital. As long as you have the piece to your radio, you can have some more private conversations than you can on some of the other channels. Let me close by talking about Microsoft Office platform, O365. Teams is providing a lot of webinar access, as well as data collaboration, especially when you're operating outside your internal share drives. This is something that's a lot easier to collaborate through web, internet-based, that you can, multi-jurisdictional type teams can be created. So I'll bring that up. If you're not familiar with it, we can always talk offline. I know I'm over my time, so I'm gonna quit unless there's questions.
Any questions for Tim from anybody? All right, I didn't see any questions in the chat string. All right, Tim, thank you very much, appreciate it. Next, we will move on to Robert Grimm. He is the Deputy Emergency Manager for Jefferson County. So Robert, without further delay, I will turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Brian. I wanted to just reiterate or talk about what Tim was going over. You asked that question about EOC space and the social distancing. I know with Tim's EOC, it's a little bit, well, I should say a lot larger than what ours at the county is. So it came to be a problem with us, especially when we were running 6 counties out of that area. So we were required to take over different parts of the courthouse. We took over purchasing. We took over some of the AgriLife building over there with the call center. So we had to make do with what we had in the room that we needed in order to provide the social distancing. Even with that, it was still very, very difficult to practice safe social distancing within the EOC with the space that we had. We did it fairly well, not always. It's something that I think it's something new that we have to learn. but I think we did okay with it. I just wanted to bring that up to let you know that we did have some issues within the county with the space that we have for our EOC, and that we are looking at different areas that we can go ahead and move our EOC into. Some of the other things that Tim was talking about, we set up a call center for some of our communications that we had, to where people from the 6 county area could call in to set up an appointment for the test sites. And this is going over the VoIP problems that we had, because we used Verizon's VoIP, voice over internet, with the wireless system that we had. And what we found out was that some of our older buildings, especially in the courthouse, are not very good with the wireless phone system that we had here. We did have some issues with it, with the calls dropping or not always being up, losing service and everything. So what we decided to do in our after action review was we're going to hardwire in there along with the VoIP wireless. So we'll be able to have a redundancy on our communications for the phone systems that we had. Verizon was very, very helpful with us on setting up the call center, getting everything up and running and being there when we needed it. Just something that we looked at, something we need to go back through and work on a little bit better. We think the landlines in the call center are going to be something that we can use from here going forward. What we've noticed, not just during this pandemic when we set up our EOC, but last time when we had to set up for Imelda too, was that the call centers that we have set up are for the outlying jurisdictions or the unincorporated areas of the county. We noticed that the 911 system gets overwhelmed with calls, and we'll get calls in for people who need rescued or need help out there. So what we're setting up for that is a call center for the county to try to build on that, and to try to alleviate some of the calls into the 911 Sheriff's Department, so we can take those calls, augment our call center with them to try to best serve our community. I don't want to go over the same thing that Tim went, but that's pretty much what I have. Of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Alrighty. No questions for Robert. If you do come up with something, you can always ask him at the end of this section, by all means. Next up, we will have Frank Shannon. He is the Director for Regional Customer Service with Entergy Beaumont, and he's going to talk about some of the challenges and things that they went through for systems resiliency and their piece in emergency management. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Frank. Frank, are you still on mute? What? All right. Frank, are you there with us? Frank, are you there with us? Did I lose anybody? Says my internet connection is unstable. Can anybody hear me? Speak up.
I can hear you. It shows Frank is sharing his screen, but it doesn't show audio. It just shows.
Yeah, I see his screen. I just don't see or hear the audio on it.
So I don't know where his audio went.
I just emailed him. This is Eric. Hopefully he's going to unmute or whatever it takes to get connected. Brian, this is Eric. While we're waiting for Frank, a question perhaps for... There he is. Okay,
can you
Hey,
hear
Eric?
me now?
Yep.
Eric, I got to break in, guys. Eric, can you take over hosting for a few minutes? I know Frank's going to jump on anyway. We just had one of the plant alarms go off. I got to go see what's going on. I hope to be back in the not too distant future. Thanks.
Good luck. All right, Frank, we see your screen. Please.
Do you see the? All right, so you see the Energy Storm Center page? That's the one I
That was
pulled
on
up.
before. We're on. I think you're.
Your desktop. We can see your desktop with all of your little apps and things.
There you go.
There you go. Just
No,
you got
thank
it.
you.
All right.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. I appreciate everybody joining. So I do work for Entergy, and several pieces in the COVID environment that we're living in. We just recently had our system storm drill, and we called it a dual event. So it would be a hurricane impact with the COVID piece, a big part of how we would plan and how we would restore. It would definitely add a dimension to our restoration that I don't think any of us would have considered previously, especially given and using Hurricane Rita and Hurricane Ike, where we brought in outside of 10,000 workers for restoration. There would definitely be some challenges, and one of the benefits of walking through a storm drill was identifying some of those. So again, that is a big piece of our planning for this year, for a major event, a hurricane or ice storm in the winter. So all that to say that we are prepared, we are ready. It is part of our, even during hurricane season, we are speaking at least weekly, and now more than ever, given the COVID piece, about how we would, walk through different scenarios, different category storms, different points of impact, flooding, Imelda and Harvey, I think better prepared us for a flooding event as well as an impact from a hurricane. So definitely some challenges. I do believe that given, our footprint at Edison Plaza, we have some backup storm centers in Conroe and the Woodlands, that we would be able to function with the social distancing, with the masks, to staff up and be able to do the things that we need to do to restore. On the grid resiliency piece, we continue to make significant investments on both our distribution and transmission infrastructure, a lot of investment in technology. In fact, we just rolled out the new My Energy platform. So if you go to energy.com, it offers a whole host of options for the customer, and a completely different look to paying your bill and looking at outages and looking for information. The website that I have pulled up, it's the Storm Center, and it offers a lot of good tools and resources. And I think it's been said multiple times, is the importance of having a plan, whether it's for your organization or yourself, your family. So we highly encourage that. We did have the benefit, and I say benefit only because it didn't make landfall in Texas, but Cristobal, we deployed employees from Texas, and there was mutual assistance employees that came in from around the country to Louisiana in anticipation of Cristobal. And no issues from a COVID perspective that we're aware of. So again, the challenges that are going to be present, we managed fairly well. And again, it was a small tropical storm, but it gave us some more insight onto the things that we need to do better in preparing. And I think there's going to be some logistic challenges we'll need to work through, testing protocols, those types of things. So again, from our perspective, we're ready. We've been preparing, continue to prepare, work with our partners and, you know, local, state, county officials. So that said, if anyone has any questions or would like some more detail on something.
Thanks, Frank. I don't see any on the chat, but I will, given Carol Riley's talk and the public face from the Port of Beaumont, from the Beaumont Police Department side, are you integrated with Carol's programs in terms of dissemination of information?
Yeah, and so, and I'll be honest with you, my role is more from an operations perspective. I know our customer service folks interact on several platforms in terms of disseminating information. I'm not incredibly well versed on them, so be more than happy to get you in contact with someone who could. But I know we've got a seat at the table and you know, continue to communicate with our partners as storms develop. And
we work with you guys. We work with Pam.
Yeah, and I didn't want to throw Pam under the bus, but I know she's worked I know that trying to get some information on the various apps and communication. So I knew Pam
She's
was
on.
in.
We have you on all of our counties. Your link is on all our counties, and Pam.
Okay, great.
And Eric, for what it's worth, this is John Durkee. The energy outage application is very strong, both on the internet and on the cell phone side. So they have most of the community knows all about it and how to get outage information from Energy.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Carol. Frank, I guess, you know, hearing from industry, that one of the key questions, understanding that outages can be an inevitable consequence of a major storm event. Reliability of an estimation of resumption of power is so important. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we work through, there's parallel paths during a restoration. So we've got our industrial customers, we've got our critical care like fire departments, police, water. So we really are running several paths to restoration. Generally speaking, the most important piece and the first piece is just the assessment. So based on the assessment is when you start to see and we'll start to communicate estimated restoration times. For the industrials and our critical care customers, usually there's an interface with an industrial rep or a customer service rep or somebody, you know, close to reach. But we do use our outage map to communicate that type of information to our customers.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Frank. Appreciate that. I will note that these presentations, in addition to being shared on this platform, will be posted on the SETWAC and the center's websites, and as well as the opportunity to engage in further Q&A. Chief Havens,
And I did.
oh, go ahead.
Real quick, I did post the link to the web page that I had pulled up in the chat. So if anybody wants to take a look at it and look at some of the different topics, well, I would highly encourage it.
Great, thank you. Chief Havens, I'm on our, you only found out about it through a butt dial, but I don't know if you're still on, but would you have any additional insights or inputs into this discussion?
The only thing I might have to offer to the group, I know I've had this conversation with John Durkee and other members of the SNCA, but just to keep everybody in the same informational loop, the reentry plan for the area, typically how we do that as a region is, several years ago we had the whole, Tim will appreciate this, the old hologram fiasco where we were passing out stickers for people to put on their IDs so they get past checkpoints and everything. Well, we learned the hard way that was not the best idea, best practice. But what we have learned is that if each of the respective companies out there can identify the folks that they're going to need to get back into their facilities, their essential personnel, in order to do a quick reconnoiter of their facilities, damage assessment, and try to start getting the appropriate measures moved in that direction so that they can get back up and operational. If they could identify those people by issuing them a company ID that identifies them as a member of the corporate hurricane response team or hurricane damage assessment team or something like that, and have that with them whenever they try to re-enter the area, that should provide an adequate means for them to get in. If there's any problems, all the area EMCs have put out there that they can be contacted directly by the industrial brigade leader or plant manager for to help expedite getting folks in. The one thing that we always try to remind everybody is that when we're trying to get essential employees back in, we're only trying to get the essential employee in. We're not trying to get the family and friends and everybody else in. It's just the essential employee. It's quite chaotic in the immediate aftermath of any type of evacuation or landfall, and there will be things that will slip through the cracks, but we all do try to do everything we can to facilitate the resurgence of normal business practices as best we can, as quickly as we can. That's really about all I got to add to the conversation. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to entertain them, or we can always talk offline.
Yeah, Louis, let me, this is John Durkee, let me add two things. One is your understandings are correct, and in connection with that understanding, we have made a commitment to the chiefs and to area response that all of the plant people that operate under those rules are going to act properly. They actually have a code of conduct. The second thing I'll mention is, by the way, the history behind the code of conduct was one of our guys in company fire retardant clothing showed up at the end of a long line. That this is a Rita instance where there was gas shortages. Waited in line with his bass boat, and we decided that was not a very good thing to do. But the second observation I'll make is the identification system that you talked about. We actually fired that up. Robert Grimm will be aware of this in connection with the closing of the Louisiana border. We had Louisiana people and they needed to come in. And so the method that we used to have people cross the border from an identification point of view largely looked like the hurricane protocol. There was a lot of chat over in Austin by the Texas Chemistry Council and the governor, who did not know how that worked, but I assured them that this was going to be okay, and it worked out just fine.
Thanks, John. A key issue, and we saw it in Harvey as the Cajun Navy database was hacked. Any mention of cybersecurity protocols from Tim or Robert or the chief?
Well, the only thing I'll say about that is that all of us have reaped the benefits and the and the pain and suffering of dealing with large groups of volunteers. And from at least our perspective from Port Arthur, and I think Tim and Robert will echo the sentiment. It's very important that anybody that does come to a particular area of operation, that they check in with the EOC, with the leadership, so that we can get an account on who's actually involved. None of us really feel comfortable using volunteers for various liability and accountability reasons, and it's a challenge. That's all I can say. I've had this conversation with EMCs all up and down the Gulf Coast, and it's kind of, Pandora's box has been opened with some of these past events, and it's truly going to be a terrific challenge to try to manage those type of problems in the future.
Thanks, Chief. Yeah, with the resources limited, as Carmen was indicating, due to unrest as well as the pandemic, and then you overlay that with cyber, there's no shortage of challenges in the situation of the storm event. And one other issue that I might bring up, and perhaps we can, maybe Dr. Haselbeck will have something to mention about it, but what's come up in terms of database is geospatial referencing of resources. Anybody want to comment on progress towards geospatial mapping of our 3 or 9 county region, and where that might stand?
Well, this is Lee. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And we actually are lucky in that we are getting the best elevation data in the country. The USGS got appropriated for the 3 lower counties here, which is Jefferson, Chambers, and Orange, to pilot their first 3D national terrain model. So that's good news. And they're hoping to ask for more money in the future, but they're not there yet. And with this, I just want to comment, I'll come back in later, but there's a request out for a national science foundation grant with resiliency, and the comments that Carmen made about the non-congregant housing. I know we need to get standards for that and find out how we can get more than just some hotels for it. But with that, it also needs to be geospatially put together. And that is something that I want to see if people have interest in doing that, so that we can use all the resources in our community for that option as soon as possible.
Thanks, Lee.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Well, if it's okay, we are ahead of schedule. If it's okay with y'all, perhaps we'll just power through and turn to the waterway operations. Scott, are you ready to rock and roll with your presentation?
I believe I am. Give me a second to put it on the screen and make sure everybody has access to it.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, no.
Assuming everybody can see that.
Yes. I
Okay.
can.
So I'm gonna talk about the impact hurricanes and other events, disruptions to the marine system, things throughout the year, but then there are events that are unplanned, and I'm going to provide a bit of a very high-level overview of the Coast Guard's approach to this. Some of you will be very familiar with it. We start with the National Incident Management System, which is a comprehensive national approach to responding to events. It's something that most of you are familiar with, so I'm not going to spend much time on it. But for those that are not, there are doctrines that influence how everything is approached from a federal level. And actually, it applies across state and local levels as well. There are requirements for certain non-government organizations and owners of critical infrastructure to be aware of, be trained in, and to utilize this same system. So as we drill down on this, there are 5 components in NIMS. They include preparedness, communications, resource management, command and management, and ongoing management and maintenance. This is just the high-level stuff. We're gonna focus on the command and management function, which is where most of us are going to reside, I think, or at least for the marine transportation system. And I'm going to even focus more on the incident command system, which is what the Coast Guard utilizes at the local level to respond to these events. And I'm going to try to provide an insight into how we do that a little bit, but how that influences our communications and interaction with our stakeholders, including those of you on the phone on this webinar, and how we bring these resources together to provide a response to restoring our waterway. ICS is a standardized all hazard, all risk approach. It doesn't matter what the incident is. ICS can be scaled up or down to respond to the smallest event or the largest event. This is a large event organizational chart that the Coast Guard might throw out there and utilize. What I want to focus on is in the blue column under planning. The next to the last entry there is MTSR unit leader. So that's a division, a group within the planning section in the ICS structure dedicated to marine transportation system recovery. And that is our goal. We operate under a bunch of mandates. For those that are interested, when we provide this slideshow, you can look these up and see how they might impact you. But the ICS goals of marine transportation recovery are dedicated to these mandates. For minor disruptions to the waterway, including relatively minor storms, we can operate using the Vessel Traffic Service advisories, recommendations, and directions. As we get more complicated and more authorities are needed, the captain of the port has safety zones and security zones and captain of the port orders that they can resort to. And then we also utilize the port coordination team, and we're gonna actually focus on that. Many on this call or on this webinar are part of our local port coordination team, and I'm gonna focus a little bit on what that team does, how they do it. So what exactly is the MTSRU? It's an overall federal, state, and local authority group dedicated to restoration of our marine transportation system with a goal of resuming commercial activity. A major event, as you're well aware, we see the damage it can do to trees and homes and the electrical grid and so on. But for those that operate on the waterway, it does just as much damage, and it takes a concerted effort on the part of many people to restore that to functional capabilities. Some of the responsibilities of this group of folks includes tracking and reporting the status of the transportation system, understanding the different pathways and priorities and criticalities, providing an avenue for stakeholder input on establishing other priorities, providing and identifying courses of action to restore it, identifying those resources needed to restore it, recommending priorities for recovery operations, and restoring basic functionality of the MTS. Also understand that on a large waterway, a lot of the resources needed to restore it may be needed in multiple places. So when you have a large event like an Ike or a Rita or a Katrina, it is not just a single waterway looking for resources. Multiple waterways are looking for resources, and they tend to get spread out pretty thin. So reporting up the priorities of our area helps senior leadership to determine the priorities in a larger geographical area like the Gulf of Mexico, or even larger if needed. At the local level, I just pointed out that the MTSRU is within the planning section of the ICS structure. And within the ICS, the Unified Commander has more than just restoration of the waterway under their belt. They have other issues that they are working on. They are working on urban SAR concerns with our partner EOCs. Maritime search and rescue, environmental response, hazards within the waterway, and then all the logistical and salvage operations necessary. We're working with TxDOT and Louisiana Department of Transportation with respect to bridges, including drawbridges and locks. So there's multiple pieces working together and multiple things being looked at simultaneously. On the Sabine-Neches waterway, since we're kind of focused a little bit local, we have actually moved that MTSRU up to the same level as the operations planning and logistics in order to give the incident commander, the Unified Command, a little bit more visibility on the concerns of the waterway, because it is such a significant criticality for this area. And so in order to establish that visibility, they've moved that up, which is a really good thing. And that MTSRU is not just reporting to the incident commander. That data is going up for the Coast Guard to our bosses in New Orleans, and then on up to Portsmouth, Virginia, and even Washington, D.C., in order for them to make decisions on resources and getting those down here as well. The MTSRU locally has basically four key components that I want to focus on. There are others. CART is just an acronym that is nothing more than a database for reporting issues up the chain of command. And so it's just a computer tool that we will use to populate. Now, many of the industries in the local area are aware that we have put out prior to hurricane season a form for them to submit back to us that establishes their baseline level of operations. In other words, in order to establish how much impact has occurred on the waterway, we need to know what the baseline is. And many of our port partners have graciously filled that out and returned it to us. And that information has been populated in the database and is ready to go should something happen. There are two others that are more hands-on. That is the assessment and the restoration part. That is assessing what the status of the waterway is after a storm. That's where our NOAA and Army Corps partners and some of our local folks like the Jefferson County Sheriffs provide boats and side scan sonar and so on and so forth. Moreover, a lot of our industry partners who have boats on the waterway following a storm and want to get back to work provide immediate eyes-on evaluation of the status of the waterway, and they have been gracious to share that with us as well. The last part and the focus here is the PCT. Many on this call participate in that call. It is the port coordination team. And that port coordination team interacts with multiple folks, and I think we're going to do that. I put on here in the upright Texas and Louisiana navigation restoration teams. The Army Corps is a key partner in restoration of our waterways, and we actually work with two districts, the Galveston district and the New Orleans district, because of the nature of the Coast Guard's authorities there. Moving on, within the CART, the database, our focus is broken down in these broad categories. And this, you can see, is the baseline data that we've populated. If we drill down a little bit, you could look at individual facilities, individual monitoring systems, individual anchorages, and then we make available following the storm as we assess information available about their availability, whether they're fully available, partially available, or not available, and that helps direct resources. In our PCT, many of the federal agencies that participate are listed here on the left. I won't drill down on them all, but many participate, and truthfully, the larger the event, the more agencies participate. The smaller the event, the fewer are necessary, but they're all engaged and they're all on our notification list. At the state level, we certainly work with local partners in keeping the waterway and associated resources engaged and responded to. TGLO, especially when it comes to spill response and certain wrecks, TxDOT keeping the waters and bridges open, emergency management people, and so on. Drilling down a little bit more, our local partners, Sabine Neches Navigation District, our Chiefs Association, certainly the county judge and the sheriff, LNVA, and our city mayors and so on are certainly engaged in providing input. And then lastly, what we tend to look at is our industry partners and the ones who utilize the waterway the most, the Sabine Pilots, the Intracoastal Canal Association, our Port Readiness Committee, our Harbor Safety Committee, and all of our facility reps and allied services such as our Harbor Tug Services and so on. We sort of had a test of operating this system in a pandemic with Cristobal. So like others, we use this not just as an opportunity to respond, but also to train and drill and see how things went. As always, lessons are learned. One of the things we learned is that the teleconference calls during a pandemic are not much different than they are with COVID-19. The smaller the group meetings that we have, the better. We determined that the large incident response teams that are needed for a large incident will not work. And so we operated a couple of breakout groups. In other words, instead of putting an entire response team in one room and in different places in that room, we took some of those entities and moved them into different rooms or even different buildings. We did test out these Zoom meetings and video teleconference calls. There are some issues there that need to be worked out, but as identified on this call, it seems to be working fairly well. I showed these pictures last time, but I understand there's some new people on the call. So I just want to point out that in a full incident response, this is what you might see. This is an MTSRU at the, I forget the name of the storm, but the one that hit North Carolina about 3 years ago. And this is what it would look like. And here's another one for a larger storm. I believe this is in Houston. So you can see that COVID imposes significant challenges for effective communications when you're used to drilling and training in an environment like this. and now you're restricted to smaller groups and separated out. Even the briefings for the higher echelon are going to be a little more complicated. I think we're working that out. And last, this is the response of the MTSR unit only in New York City. And so you can see how many partners are involved, and there are many more that are just on a telephone conference call. So the MTSRU, the link into that for most of our port partners is the PCT. If you're not on the call and you need to be, please get in touch with me. Happy to have the discussion about how that should work. Going into hurricane season, I always share that on the Vessel Traffic Service website, we have a link here. You'll see it on about middle of the menu bar on the left, hurricane season. So to get here, if you Google VTS Port Arthur, we're the first entry there. The hurricane season link provides 4 documents. One is our industry hurricane planning information. So for those that are operating or plan to operate on the Sabine-Neches waterway, it talks about the port conditions that the captain of the port sets, what that means, what restrictions there may be. That was recently updated, and we will change that to updated in 2020. It provides remaining in port notifications. So if a storm is coming and a vessel cannot evacuate the port, there are notification forms there to let the captain of the port know that you need to stay in so that we can evaluate the safety of that on the rest of the port. The MTS recovery form I talked about a little bit, and the facility status report. The essential elements of information is provided before hurricane season for the baseline we talked about, and the facility status report is submitted after the storm to let us know the impacts that each facility has sustained during the storm. If there is other links or information that you would like to see added here, also contact me, and or if it needs to be posted elsewhere, we can do that as well. That is the really high overview of what we are trying to achieve here with the Coast Guard and how we do it. And so, questions?
Thanks, Scott. I'm not seeing anything on the chat. I will ask you about the PCT and there are bandwidth issues, as I understand. There's only it's a needs to know, but it's fairly comprehensive. But perhaps a general question that can be addressed by not only you but others, as we are dependent on these digital platforms. Are there workarounds, or how do you, in the case of a system failure or too many folks on the line, are there workarounds that you've got planned on the PCT?
The workarounds, our PCT call is a teleconference, so it can be accessed via hard lines or cell phones. We experienced during Ike some cell coverage disruptions down here, which required that those who were participating in the calls drive some distance to get cell coverage. So myself, I was driving to Beaumont just to participate in the calls because there was no accessibility down here. Since that time, there have been some satellite phones put into the resource locker. Availability of that should be sufficient for our port partners, or at least for the Coast Guard to get on the call. We will have to see how the effect will be on others in the area. We are utilizing text and email. So if access to email is not challenged, we can share our resource needs and concerns via email, which will not be near as efficient, but it will get the job done as far as getting the reporting requirements up and resource requests into the system. I think that's doable.
Thank you, Scott. Steve Kern, I know that you have your back, and we look forward to getting your comments. And if it's okay with you, we'll finish with this session, and then we'll plug you in. So I'm not seeing any other questions or comments on the chat. Pete Culp from Sabine Pilots is scheduled to be up next. Pete, are you on? Can you share your screen?
I'm here. No, I don't have a presentation for this because primarily everything that Scott just went through, we're basically a subcontractor for Scott in this whole evolution. Excuse me a second. So the Coast Guard's job in this is, they're coordinating all the checking of the physical waterways around here, during the recovery phase. Tim and the Corps and everybody else will check the waterways, make sure we don't have any ships or boats sitting in the middle of the ship channel. Once that's been accomplished, then the captain of the port and the president of the Pilots Association will get together and say, okay, what do you think? Are we safe to try something? And just like after the last flood event after Imelda, we were with Scott every, 4 to 6 hours, I think, trying to figure out when it was going to be safe to start moving vessels. And the pilots just use their, combined hundreds of years of experience on this waterway to start moving vessels in and out, where specific locations on the waterways were viable. It was a safe transit. And some places like back behind Texaco Island were questionable because of the current flowing out of the intercoastal waterway. So the pilots are just, we're using our own boats, our own electronic data, plus all the, excuse me, plus all the, actual out on the waterways experience and input from all our pilots moving to help the Coast Guard fill in the gaps of the knowledge gaps of where they don't have video and where they don't have terminals with cameras or electronic data collection, NOAA weather information. So we're basically subcontracting to the Coast Guard on information side. We also have we're building a new command center over on Jimmy Johnson Boulevard that'll be able to assist the Coast Guard if they ever need it. We've got a nice facility going up there. Should be moving in next month. And as far as before any weather event like a hurricane or something, we're following the Coast Guard's guidelines. Our pilots are commissioned by the state of Texas to protect the state welfare and the environment. And we will move whatever ships need to get out of here until the last one's gone. And when the last pilot gets off, we'll reposition all our personnel and assets to a safe location. And then we'll just sit around and ride it out. And then when the Coast Guard calls us, we're all coming back. We through the COVID thing, we already got through the letter writing and company approval thing. We wrote a letter for our employees to carry with them, giving the employee's name and driver's license number and on company letterhead signed by the president, and said, hey, in case you have any questions about this person's authority to return to the area or to move around during COVID, please contact Vessel Traffic Service to, if you absolutely have to have somebody to verify, contact me, the operations manager with the pilots, or, if you know how it is. So like I said, we're 100% supporting the Coast Guard in returning the economics back. And we have ships moving very quickly after Imelda. And, as we always do, we're here to serve the community and the clients and the Coast Guard to make sure, if it can be done, it will be done. That's all I've got. Any questions for me?
I'm not seeing anything on chat. Any questions for Pete, pilots? Well, you guys are right on top of the situation on the waterway. You guys understand what can be moved and what can't, given the currents, that the navigation safety issues on the channel. Let me ask you a question though, Pete, if I could, and maybe Scott. We don't have the navigation district. I know there's plans to augment our waterside firefighting capabilities. Does anybody want to comment on where that stands?
I certainly can't. I know that they are still working on it, but I don't know the current state of their analysis and their budget issues. So I'd say we wait until they can give us an updated report, perhaps at the SETWAC meeting.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you. It is underway. We're looking at that capacity, which I think is acknowledged to be needed. Tim White from the Corps of Engineers, our regional director, are you on and ready to talk a little bit about the Corps' role in recovery?
Hi, everyone. Yes, this is Tim White. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Terrific. Last year was my first time to present at this forum, Eric, and I think if some in the room were there last year, I had as my title, #The Struggle is Real. And I don't know if it could be any more real than it is right now, but we at the Corps of Engineers are doing everything we can to take care of each other, take care of ourselves, while accomplishing our mission. Let me see if I can share my screen.
Do you know how to do it, or do you need directions?
I would love to have directions.
Okay, if you bring your mouse down, you should see share screen. It's in green.
How is that? Can you see my introductory screen?
You can see your name. It's really big.
Need to turn video back on too.
Oh, did it? Yes, Tim, if you could turn your video back on, that would help.
Okay.
Unless you're hiding things.
No, not hiding anything.
Just teasing.
And I see you.
Good.
Start video.
So you hit the green share screen button, and then in the top left corner, you should see your name. You just click on it for the screen.
Yeah, at the bottom, it asked me to share screen.
Yes, sir.
And when I click on that, it asks me my entire screen. I say yes.
It shows that your recording is off, so I'm not sure if that's the reason why we can't see it.
Lower left-hand corner, there's a start video button.
Is that helpful?
Oh, we see you, yes.
Okay. But you're not seeing my screen yet.
Right. But at least you got your video back. Okay, so we click the green button, share screen. Did you already open it up?
My my presentation, yes.
Okay, good. So you just click the green button, share screen, and you should see yourself at the top left-hand corner. And then click share. Good job.
How's that?
Perfect.
Well, okay. Sorry for the delay. My name is Tim White, and I'm the resident engineer here for the Corps of Engineers, and that's the construction branch of Galveston District. The disclaimer is that these are not comments and the findings and opinions of the official Department of the Army, but we put this presentation together to capture where we are on the Sabine Neches and what we would do in the case of an emergency. Scott presented on the port coordination team. We do too. We see the Coast Guard front and center and the Sabine pilots, and we interface with them very closely when there is an incident coming. One of the things that we'll do when we know something's imminent, we'll go to safe harbor. So we have a large boat, our Turpin, and we have our survey boat, which has the side scan sonar, and we'll probably head up towards Beaumont. Once the incident is passed, we'll get on board as quickly as we can, with the caveat that we have our people that we're going to be looking after first and foremost. We've got some surveyors here on our station at Port Arthur, and we are also supported by the Galveston District and their staff. The navigation restoration point used to be Chris Fraboda. He's taken a promotion. Tricia Campbell is now in that spot. She is backed up by Carl Brown. Aaron Durba does hydrographic survey. My name's Tim White. And those of you around for any length of time in the Port Arthur area, Joe Sedtall is our hydrographic surveyor. We have multiple contracts. So once we get out of safe harbor and with our equipment, we'll start to run the waterway, the Neches, the Sabine Neches Canal. And if we find that we have any issues on navigation, we've got a MATOC, a multiple award task order contract, unrestricted contractor pool. We've got pipeline dredges. We've got mechanical dredge on a single award task order contract. So we have the ability to bring our contractors in to help us get the open and back to business. We also rely on our partners. So as we were looking at our port coordination team and the shippers and some of the law enforcement and ports, we count on other people to provide information to us as well. As we get out on the water and start to run our surveys, we typically will run long lines along the center line of the canal, of the waterway, and then we'll run at the quarters. And so we want to get as much data as we can, as quickly as we can. And when we find an obstruction, if there are any, we'll go ahead and then do sections, and we'll run those sections at distances that'll allow us to have an idea of what the impact is. Once we do that, we'll develop a map. And so in the upper right-hand corner of this slide, you'll see this boat is a twin to our Turpin. This is the Tanner II. It's a big survey vessel, and we'll gather as much information as we can. The bottom right shows what we're trying to accomplish by running our boats on the waterway. And the output and the takeaway from my presentation will be the eHydro website. So when we go into hurricane season, we have a series of maps, and I'll show that on the next slide, that are developed from condition surveys that we've run approximately up to 3 months prior to the start of hurricane season. And we do condition surveys throughout the year, as well as before a dredging operation and after a dredging operation. And those two surveys determine the AD versus the BD and the payment mechanism for our contractors doing work for us. What we also have then is the ability to upload the results of those surveys to provide users, stakeholders, with a map that shows the current condition. And that's the main part of this slide. And that's www. SWG is Southwestern Galveston. USACE is the Army Corps of Engineers, army.mil, and then missions. And you'll find yourself on this site and have the ability to get to Sabine Neches waterway. So I'm circling that for hydrographic surveys. And it's a nice website. It gets you to the approximate location. And then once you're in that location, you get to say, okay, I want to know what's happening in this particular area. You zoom in and you click on that particular map. We keep those updated before and after hurricane season, as well as after an incident. So one of the things that we are charged with is trying to determine what the impact, and whether it's sediment that's coming in, and we've had some presentations where we show the plume of sediment that's coming out of lakes or other tributaries into our waterway. And we are able to calculate the impact, financial impact, as it relates to removing that amount of dredge material. We've got a pretty cool operations dashboard as well. You might want to see that this is our newest and greatest navigation projects and contracts in our Southwestern Galveston district. And that's the highlighted area on this slide. We now have the ability to, from this website, find out what active contracts there are. This particular area, we would click on that area, we'd zoom in and see different conditions, different alerts for draft restrictions. And then we can zoom in even further from this GIS and its live updates and see what's happening. In this particular case, we're over in the Galveston area, but we talk about real-time information, and with our dredge quality management and integrating with some of our AIS, knowing where the vessels are. This is a very, very useful tool. You can see that across the bottom, we have the Sabine Neches waterway contracts by project area. And that's where we are currently. The takeaway from this slide is that we have resources. Our Turpin is back in our yard now, and that is in Port Arthur. It just went through a haul out and refurbishment. It's working beautifully. And then there are several other across our Southwest Galveston district that we could bring here the smaller boats, ours is the Port Arthur PA4. And we see ourselves getting a new boat first, second quarter of 21. But that's our survey vessel. Certainly goes up the Neches and other areas. Very nimble, very quick to get there. We trailer it, we put it where we need it, and we get data as quickly as we need to once the event is gone. Here's how you can find us. We're on Facebook and YouTube, and a couple of interesting things going on at the Corps of Engineers. That completes my presentation. Unless there are
Anybody
any
have
questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ryan,
No
you're
questions
back.
for the Corps? I am back. Yeah, thank you.
I hope
had to run
everything's
away.
still in one piece.
All is well. All is well. I teach these guys to pull the alarm early and often. So I'd rather have a couple of either false alarms or near false alarms than be late with the one that counts. So
well, good.
It was very minor, very minor.
I have a question for Tim and perhaps Peter Cope. Advanced maintenance in terms of identifying channel vulnerabilities, high spots, vulnerable to additional sedimentation in storm. Has there been any? Are there any plans or projects dealing with advanced maintenance, over dredging, et cetera, in the channel in anticipation of this year's hurricane season?
So good question. This is Tim, and we have our authority comes from the president and from Congress and in what we're able to accomplish. Those budgets are both maintenance and advanced maintenance. Sometimes the advanced maintenance is funded, in which case we'll have our maintenance contractor a required template, an over depth, and an advanced maintenance. So it could be the template plus as much as 2 or 3 feet of advance and over depth. So yes, we do, and it's a dollar decision based on available funding. And one of the things that we watch very closely, and Peter, you'll know this from the junction at Texas Point, we look at that very regularly. And when we plan our maintenance dredging operations, we usually look at those areas that sediment is prone to fall out so that we could include those in our dredging plans.
Thank you.
All right.
Eric, yeah, I just got one question for you, Eric.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was wondering when this lunch is going to show up over here.
It's on it. I just got a call, Tim. It's on its way.
Yeah, Uber Eats for everybody,
Uber.
right, Eric?
Yeah, Uber Eats for everybody.
So Brian, Steve Curran had some comments on Stan and Blackboard. I know Martin Gonzalez has indicated he's trying to get back online. So perhaps if you could reach out to Steve and get his comments, and then hopefully Martin will be on with us to talk about TxDOT.
Oh, did we already do Peter?
Yes.
Oh, we already did. Okay, all right. Tim was talking when I dropped back in, so I was just assuming it was going in order. So my bad.
And Martin
Steve Curran.
is on. Sorry, Martin's
He's not on yet.
No,
Oh,
I
yes.
see him. Martin, you there?
All right. Well, in the meantime, we'll reach out to Steve Curran. And Steve, if you're on with us, if you have some extra information to share about Blackboard Connect and all that kind of stuff, there seems to be a little interest in that.
I do. I'm going to see if I can't share my screen with you guys. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Oh, might be starting. There we go. I think we're seeing it here.
Do you see the stand?
Yep. Yep. You might want to make it full screen for us to, there you go.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Okay. I've got a couple of things. I was listening to Tim Ochnichek earlier. I just want to touch base on a couple, a little bit on the radio system, and but on the stand, I just want to let you guys know that we are really working on this site to make it work. And looking at the screen right there, that's the website. When you go to the website, that's it. You can hit the register button right there, and that's how you can sign up. That's what we tell the communities. But notifications on the left over there, you see June 18th from ExxonMobil Beaumont, where they posted a message there when they did some testing. Well, we are working on Blackboard Connect. With an RSS feed that there. And as I'm talking to you right now, Kaylin, who works with me, is about to send a message, and it will post there. And it takes 2 to 3 minutes before it actually posts on the actual website. But we can show that we can post from our Blackboard Connect emergency messages now. And so one of the things we're doing, this is, we've been working on this since May to really improve that website and make it work. Because really, we post to the community, but it doesn't really post on the stand website. Okay, hang on, let me see what happens. Okay, Kaylin just sent that message. See that from the SET RPC? Where this is a test of the Southeast Texas Alerting Network. This is only a test. So it works. We can literally do this. So what we're doing, we are putting into the Blackboard Connect side these feed attachments to the to Blackboard Connect for each entity that has the system that we have registered on the Blackboard Connect. And they can now grab that RSS feed when they send a message to the community, and it will post on this website. It'll stay there for about 48 hours. And I've got to keep the messages below for it to fit on there. But we've got that fixed. The other thing that they've done on the web, you see traffic conditions, that's coming straight from TxDOT. And that is updated regularly all the time with a Twitter feed. And then over here to the right, you can see where it says few more tropical conditions. We're going to change the wording on that. We're going to probably get rid of this wording right here where it says North Atlantic. And we have the National Weather Service out of Lake Charles. Their Twitter feed goes in here. So when I click on that, hopefully it pops it up. So that's what it does. See, and that's what you're going to be able to see. But what we want is to see this Twitter feed be on the home page. And so we're working on getting that done with Blackboard Connect and the stand. So we're working with industry. Industry is who funds this website, but industry also helps pay the match on the port security grant that we get to pay for the Blackboard Connect service for all the region to use. So I just want to let you know that this is going to be a new and improved stand website. And we're going to do some training with the emergency management coordinators and folks that would be posting so that their information will now post onto the stand website like we've been advertising that it would and hasn't done in probably quite a while. So this is a major fix that we've been working on since May. When Sue Landry was about to retire, she kind of initiated this upgrade. We've hired Pat Grimes part-time to be our liaison on this, working with the industry, and we'll also work with the Sabine chiefs and the entities that are going to be using the system so that we can get everybody trained up to make sure that they know how to use it. And we want to take advantage of this really good system that we pay quite a lot of money for. And it's basically, I hate to say it's been underutilized, but we can take better advantage of it with the improvements we're making here. It's going to definitely be beneficial to the citizens. We get calls from people, I'm not receiving messages, or I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing that, and we're trying to fix that. We want them to be able to go to this website and look at the messages that are coming in, and they can check out notifications, traffic conditions, and the weather right there on the homepage. And then they can also register there. So it's a new and improved STAN website. And we feel really good about where we're getting. We're not 100% there yet. We're getting there. And we plan to do the annual exercise in July, hopefully, towards the end of July, where we actually will test and have everybody actually put the RSS feed onto their test message that they send out to their communities when we do that exercise. So we'll see who wants to participate and get that list and get everything set up so that we do a test run in a couple of days at the end of July. So that's one of the things, that's a big thing we've been working on. Regarding the regional radio system, just to let you know, starting in 2006, that's when South County, Murray County, and Jefferson County, and then after that we merged with Hardin County, we merged with Orange County, and that regional radio system is about to reach the highest level of interoperability capabilities, which is a level 5. Excuse me. On September 1st is when they plan to flip the switch, they call it. So we're going from combination of analog and digital to full 100% digital. So anything that you're using that's analog after September 1st will not work on the regional radio system. So everybody, I think, on the most part, has reached that digital level and they're ready to transition over. But that's when the switch is going to get flipped on that system. Also, on the Sabine Chiefs website for industry folks, we had one of the industries ask about what radio talk groups can be programmed on their radios. And we, right here, this tab right here, you can select that. And this gives you the talk groups that you can put on your industry radio. Everybody in the region wants everybody to have these talk groups, and they will be used during your catastrophic events in the region. And we use the Interop 1 typically as a hailing frequency, and then the other Interop channels are all assigned as needed to address the event. So I just wanted to show that to you right quick too. Oh, that's not it.
All right. Anything else, Steve?
There's one other thing. Hurricane season is coming up, and we are currently moving into getting ready to update the mitigation action plans for all the counties and municipalities and water districts and drainage districts and what have you. Now, participation forms from everybody. So if you plan to be a part of that process, you need to get that participation form into us because we'll be soon getting a contractor to help write the plan, the improvement plan. It'll take about a year, and it needs to be updated in 2022. We're about to roll into 2021. So that's why we're starting so early. The 2022 is when we got to have it completed so that we can replace the existing grants, plans. If you don't have a mitigation action plan and you have a catastrophic event happen to your area, like a hurricane, you won't get your FEMA money. You got to have your plan in place, an approved plan in place in order to receive public safety money and what have you. So just want to give everybody a heads up on that. And that's it. Brian, I'm out.
All right, Steve, thank you much. Anybody have any questions for Steve on the stand or maybe Blackboard capabilities and that kind of stuff? All right. Okay. Is Candace, is Martin on with us yet? Oh, hey,
Yes,
Martin, how you doing?
Martin's here.
All right.
I'm doing well. Sorry, I've been having technical issues.
It's all right. Par for the course, and when we're doing stuff like this, it's okay. All right. Martin Gonzalez is the regional engineer for Beaumont TxDOT, and he gave us a little bit about information about that earlier when he was introducing himself. But Martin, are you able to share your screen? Do you have something to show while you're talking?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can. So that's why I had to call in through my actual cell phone. So basically what I wanted to do was just kind of go over what it is that we're doing here in the, from the TxDOT perspective,
okay,
to prepare for hurricane season and the effort that we're doing. I'm sorry.
All right, if everybody could mute their phones except for Mr. Gonzalez, we'd appreciate it. And maybe Candace could help us out with that. All right, go ahead, Martin.
Okay, sorry about that. So again, I serve the Beaumont district as the district director of maintenance and transportation operations, and in that role, I'm responsible for all of our maintenance forces and our maintenance efforts to make sure that our roadways are being maintained in proper condition, and that we have the proper signage and all of our efforts as far as when it deals with hurricane responses, that we have evacuation routes and everything else ready. So one of the things that we've been doing, because we started hurricane season, we're coordinated with Austin and our division, our maintenance division, to make sure that we have everything necessary in the event that we have an event. I'm sorry, pardon the redundancy there. But like when we had the tropical depression just a couple of weeks back, that we didn't know if that was going to impact the area, we went ahead and started having some rehearsal scenarios, if you will. One of the things that we've done, TxDOT traditionally does an outstanding job in coming back and cleaning and putting those efforts together and helping the community. But the thing that we've been needing a little bit of improvement on is preparing and planning in the event that we have a storm coming. So Donald Smith, our district engineer, he's been with the agency for about 10 months, and I came from the Paris district and Dallas district and Wichita Falls district, and so I've been with TxDOT for 20 years. And one of the things that we do like to make sure that we're ready. We try to prepare as much as possible. So one of the things that we're doing is having our annual hurricane meeting, where we're talking about all of the things that we need to be preparing for, our equipment, making sure that we take things off the road, communicate with our contractors as we start seeing the storms, tracking them, and then reaching out to all of our maintenance sections and letting them know, based on the initial models, that it looks like they're going to impact their particular areas. So we're starting to take already efforts, for example, using this latest tropical depression that came through. Initially, it was expected that it was going to impact all of our southern counties. So that being said, our district engineer and I made the decision to have them mobilize already, let them know Sunday, first thing, Sunday morning, we will be ready. We'll have half of our staff at the section, packing for about planning on spending 3 days here in the event that the storm hit, and have our cots ready, you know, have our pillows, blankets, MREs, everything that we have. And the challenges that we have with the COVID-19 right now, we can't bring our whole entire crew. So what we're doing is ensuring that we have the proper spacing everywhere, that we have cleaning supplies, face masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, both in our facilities as well as in our vehicles, because we've got to clean our vehicles before and after every use. The other thing that we're doing is we're trying to make sure that we only have one person per vehicle where feasible. But in the event that a storm comes through, we realize that we need to have at least 2 people per vehicle, and everybody needs to make sure they have their face masks and gloves, and as well as hand sanitizer. So those are some of the precautions that we're taking with COVID-19. We made the call and had a phone call throughout the week, letting all the sections know as the model was changing, that then it appeared that it was going to be impacting both some of our southern and eastern counties within the district. So then we actually adjusted and informed Newton and Jasper that they needed to prepare to mobilize as well. So we started making those kinds of efforts 3 days before the storm was projected to come inland. So those are some of the steps that we're taking ahead of time. And I know a lot of people sometimes are like, well, what's the point of doing all that if you don't know where the storm's going to go? But, you know, I'm a firm believer that I'd rather have and not need than need and not have. And so it's important for us to have our forces already here at the location so that we can access our equipment in the event that a storm hits, and then we can go out and help the public. It doesn't do us any good to have people go home and then they can't come back to the offices. Now we can't help the public, which that's what we're supposed to be doing. So our approach is more of a proactive, erring on the side of caution approach. We are also going to be running some mock scenarios for our district so that we can get prepared and make sure that everybody's staged at the right locations for both a tropical storm and a hurricane, and then in the event that we have evacuations. So there's a series of exercises that we're going to be doing, and we're also going to be reaching out to the different DDCs, and then as counties form up EOCs, then we will be, Don Smith, our district engineer, and myself will be in charge for TxDOT here locally. So we will be communicating with all the agencies as well. Communication really is the key for us, and that's kind of what we think for everybody across the board. And we want to make sure that that we try to put forth good efforts to clean the roadways and get them passable again for the public. We recognize some of the challenges from Harvey and from Imelda as far as the flooding was concerned on the interstate. So we're looking at innovative ways to try to help mitigate those flooding issues on the interstate, because we realize the impacts that not being able to use the interstate for, I believe it was 7 days or something, has on this region, because, you know, there's a lot of transport that comes through here. So we are currently actively working on a lot of different projects, and you know, we're not going to say that we're perfect. I don't think anybody can say that, but we're working, trying to make good strides so that we are ready for the upcoming season. And I know that was really quick, and I apologize for that, but do you have anybody have any questions of me?
Martin, this is Eric Stromberg. Surface transportation connectivity is obviously critical to business and industry as well as government in our region. Drive Texas is a great resource. Wondering if there are plans to augment Drive Texas through drone technology.
Is that through drone technology?
Correct.
Right now for us, drones have been a little bit of a kind of sticky area. We've, historically we haven't had a whole lot of luck with drone usage because we have a lot of issues with, Privacy Act and things like that. So, but no, right at this time, we haven't explored that as one of our options. But we are looking at updating our system, through ITS cameras and a traffic management center to kind of help us see all the different areas as storms start moving in, so we can get eyes on early.
Thank you.
All right, any more questions for Martin? All righty. Well, thank you, Martin. We definitely appreciate that. I think we're working into our kind of our wrap up and our next what the next. It looks like we've got a couple of Lamar personnel that are going to address up to Eric. Are you going to go first, or is Dr. Hasselbach going to go first?
No, Leaf will talk about their study now.
Okay. All right, Leaf. Please take the screen as you see fit and show us some good stuff.
So can you see my screen?
Yes.
I believe so, yes.
Great. So thanks for letting me go with it. Some of you have already heard from us that last fall we launched the Southeast Texas Flood Coordination Study, and it's exploding. We have unbelievable participation locally, regionally, statewide, and actually nationally. And I'm showing you our original vision, mission, and first steps that we wrote up last fall. They are gonna be modified a little bit. Some things we realized we not gonna have the capability to do, and I'm hoping we're gonna add others. I just have 3 slides here, and I'll share an updated version of them at the end of this so that Eric can give it to you guys. But one of the reasons I'm here is I just want to show you what's happened so far. So if you see this wheel here, is what we're trying to do at Lamar is become a data and a communication collaborative. We're not trying to be a huge research center that's best in hydrology or other things like some of the large universities. We want to be your hub to facilitate when you need to work with other people. And I know CETWAC is one example of how that works well, and so is being NHS chiefs of how communication can be amazing. So here, this is people we're working with already on the different portions of the wheel. And some of our stuff is for communication. Some of our stuff is to relate to people and give them information so they can plan mitigation. And then mapping and modeling is what we're trying to coordinate. It isn't so much that we're going to do it all, but we want to make sure that it's coordinated for you. So you can see where we're at. And right now, Ports and CETWAC are together with it. And we're partially funded in this small start kick-up phase this year by the Center for Advances in Port Management. But what I want to ask of you, and I know this is a busy slide, is now we're trying to gather information. We've been going out to the communities and all as much as we can virtually under these conditions. And we've also hosted a Homeland Security exercise last month, which was unbelievably successful with flood people working with the emergency responders and figuring out, well, what do we have or what do we need? And with it, we have a plan going forward of what's really needed for the area. But we'd like to work with more people in your group that we haven't connected with yet. And so some of it for the industries, and I've started working with some of the ports, Port Arthur. We already have a small project going with them on dredging, so related on whether it's caused by these events or other information. But we have Dr. Tanesh will be trying to contact some of you, and if you could provide me with some contact information from you, might be your environmental health or safety person. We want to find out what you have for like high water marks. The Coast Guard, the Corps wants them, the USGS wants them. They want it so that they can figure out Imelda, and if they model Imelda and Harvey, all right, what really happened? Can we validate it? So that's one thing they were going. And not only high water marks, but real-time watermarks. And that's different. If you know exactly where something was at some time, it's even more valuable than just this was the highest point we got there. And then what you might need for us. So earlier we talked about that you now have to think about the non-congregate sheltering. And no one's really thought of this before. And, you know, they're using motels and hotels. Well, can you use us to try and find some other facilities we could use? Maybe we could put them in a GIS thing so that you'll have some more information of what to do if we have flooding occurring during a pandemic. So we focus first on flooding, and obviously we need to here, but we're also going forward. So with that, I also want to tell you that we have a new director for a midstream center here. So for those associated with that industry, I know he wants to meet you, and I put his contact information. I don't want to take up any more time, but we would love for you to connect with us. And we're working on getting money for it. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and you can ask questions if you want.
Thanks, Liv. Well, Brian, I guess I'll step up. Takeaways, it's communication, which is no surprise, ever more critical in the pandemic situation that we're in, assuring bandwidth, assuring redundancies, advanced planning and well-distributed protocols are more important than ever. I want to thank all of our speakers for a great job for participating this morning. Brian, I want to thank you for facilitating, moderating, and contributing to this session as Vice Chair of CETWAC. Your role, your leadership is so important to all of us here in Southeast Texas. I want to thank Candace Moore for all the work that she did in putting this thing together, making sure everything was facilitated. She did a great job. I'd like to also mention again the Education, Research, and Workforce Development Subcommittee that I chair in CETWAC. Please share, reach out with any questions, any webinar ideas, any additional training, continuing education needs that any might have. We're happy to facilitate. As I said at the outset, the purpose of the center to lead is to assure that the liaison, the partnership between academia and industry is efficient and thorough. As you heard from Leif, we are moving in that direction. And I would encourage any of you to join the subcommittee. Sharday Schick runs the workforce development aspect of this. Really important workforce development in this time when we have the opportunities on digital platforms to do training that perhaps wouldn't otherwise be available. Please let us know. All the presentations, some of them have already been posted on this site, but they will be posted on the CETWAC website as well as the Center for Port Management website. So I hope everybody just takes good care, stays healthy. Someone said, be brave and be kind. So thank you all.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. I think that just about closes us out, but I don't want to cut off any good questions or conversation. Any burning questions or conversation that anyone was looking to ask during the event here. No. All righty. If you were unable to post any information on the chat group on the right side of the screen there, please send links, attachments, emails, anything to Candace, and she will be happy to distribute it amongst the users